Hey everybody, how you doing? Good to see you here tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. A lot is happening in the world, and we are going to talk about all of it and answer questions and do all the fun stuff that we do. So, yeah, buckle up and let's do it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here. We're having yet another great late night conversation. This has been, it's like all of a sudden so much hit us all in one day, and we're going to talk about all of it here tonight. The way these streams work, first I give opening remarks. Then from there, we do the roll call where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, we answer your questions while we're still going. So the second half of the show is all you guys. We take questions three ways. Rumble Rants. You can cash at me, Caleb Moppin22. But the best way, the absolute best way, the 100% absolute best way to send questions is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way. So send questions for the second half of the show. That's second half of the show is all you guys. Ask away. Get me talking about whatever you want. As far as announcements, join the Center for Political Innovation, CPI. We are a tremendous group of people doing great work all over the country. We just had a National Day of Action a week ago to support peace talks in Russia, with Russia. And it looks like, things are moving in an interesting direction. And we're always out there. We stood with Uhuru. We stand with any country under attack. Right now, we're standing with Venezuela. And the Center for Political Innovation is moving ahead. We're a great group. We're having an event in New Jersey on January 11th. So for those of you who may not be aware, so we had a convention this summer, the Great Unity Convention. 260 people were there. And we now have a book of the convention proceedings. I just got them from the printer. I'm going to be traveling, so I wanted to, bring some with me on my travels. And I just got a few copies from the printer to take with me. This is a full color book of the proceedings of the Great Unity Convention. Look at that. Full color on every page. It's got every speech from the Great Unity Convention transcribed. It's got a bunch of articles on the history of CPI. It's got the full transcript of the Chicago sessions, the Q&A where we did, and it has all the members speaking and explaining their views and perspective. It's got articles about all the work that we've done, an interview, the full text of an interview we did with Cynthia McKinney in Russia, full text of my interview with Roger Waters. And it's just got a lot in it. It's really great stuff, right? Roger Waters. And, we printed this book in bulk, and we will be giving a free copy to everyone who comes to our event in January. So mark your calendar for January 11th. If you're coming to the event, you will get one of these at the door. And if you want to order it, it is for sale. You can get a copy on Amazon. It's not cheap because all the pages are in color, because it's a physically large book. It's not cheap. So the best thing to do is come to our event in January, but you can order it. It's on Amazon if you want a copy. I'll drop the link in the chat. It's basically just everything you need to know about CPI, and you get to know our members. You get to read the speeches. You get to see what the convention was like up close, right? Got all kinds of pictures, and it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So it's got the all kinds of stuff in there. Great article from Gabby about why she got involved with CPI. Very, very good stuff. Yeah, it's got our letter to Trump. It's got, a piece about Khrushchevism and why that's important, right? Nice big picture of Gabby there. Gabby's kind of story about how she got involved with our organization. And it's quite a good book, right? Center for Political Innovation, the Great Unity Convention, the proceedings of the 2025 National Gathering. And we're going to make a book like this every time we do a national convention. Because we want to make a record, right? Not only is there a video record, but there is a book record, and we want to have a physical copy. And so I feel good about it. I'm glad to actually get my hands on a copy. I put it together. I spent a lot of time working on the spread, getting everything together, getting the pictures together, and all of that. We got the Russian dancers and everything. Yeah, this is great. So, like I said, because the whole book is very large and it's on Amazon, and it's all in color, and it's not cheap. So just come to the event. But if you want to order one online, you can order the Great Unity Convention book. It is available if you want to have it to put on your coffee table. Right? It's a great item to put on your coffee table. Right? It's a coffee table book that we published for the CPI convention, the coffee table book of the Great Unity Convention. So I just wanted to throw that out there. If you want to get one, it is available online. You can order it on Amazon if you want it. But yeah, it's pricey, but it's worth it. It's a coffee table book all about our organization and how, it has a timeline of all the anti-imperialist work we did. We got a spread on Ibrahim Traore, and we got a spread about the Houthi book, and it's got everything in it. You'll read all about the work that we do in the book. So I just wanted to mention that we've got that. Got a stack of them to take overseas with me. I'm traveling next week. Fingers crossed. Pretty wild. But anyway, as I said before, there are three different ways that you can send questions for the second half of the show. Rumble rants are appreciated. Cash apps are appreciated, but the best way to send questions for the second half of the show is buy me a coffee. Buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions for the second half of the program. So I'm going to just give my opening remarks, then we'll do the roll call, then I answer questions for the remainder of the night. So if you got something you would like me to talk about in the second half of the program, send me a buy me a coffee. Go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin and send your question, and I will do my best to give you an answer. Thanks for being here, everybody. Venezuela. Oh my goodness, right? We are in some very, very strange times. So I don't know if you saw the Nobel Peace Prize. I have absolutely lost all respect for it. I have absolutely lost all respect for the Nobel Peace Prize. The Nobel Peace Prize was at one point given to Mahatma Gandhi. It was at one point given to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And then they gave it to Barack Obama for doing nothing, for getting elected president. And Barack Obama destroyed Libya, and he continued the drone strike program. And they gave him a Nobel Prize just because, just for getting elected. He didn't even do anything to get it. And now they've given the Nobel Prize to a woman who is calling for the United States to invade her country, to a regime change activist sponsored by the USA to try and destabilize Venezuela. It is a sick joke that they gave the Nobel Prize to a CIA color revolution activist trying to destabilize Venezuela. And it's not just the fact that they gave it to her. They gave it to her while the USA is threatening Venezuela more actively than it has before. I mean, there's been many coup attempts. There's been crippling sanctions imposed on Venezuela. But this latest thing, now the USA has, an apparatus, a military apparatus outside the country. Venezuela believes there will be strikes on the country, military strikes of some kind soon. This is all very bad. Venezuela is an anti-imperialist socialist country that has, taken control of its oil resources, the Bolivarian process, and they are now being threatened with military attack. And the Nobel Prize Committee decided to give the Nobel Prize to the woman who's calling for intervention. And in a weird way, this was a snub at Donald Trump, because Donald Trump wanted the Nobel Peace Prize. And this is weird. So Donald Trump, right? He says, look, I solved the war between Armenia and Azerbaijan. I solved the war between Thailand and Cambodia. And I'm trying to solve, I just did a peace deal, between Hamas and Israel. And so I'm trying to end the Ukraine war. So I want the Nobel Prize for me. And Trump made a big show of wanting to get the Nobel Peace Prize, and he didn't get it. They gave it to this Venezuelan regime change activist. So then Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke up and said it should have gone to Trump. And Trump said, thank you. That is a very, very, very good sign. Very, very, very good sign indeed. The fact that President Trump said thank you to the Russian president. We now find out that Melania Trump, the first lady, has been in touch with the Children's Ministry of Russia about making sure that the orphans of war and the children that have been displaced by the war get back to where they need to be, and that Russian foreign ministry, or the Ministry of Children of Russia, the government ministry that deals with children's affairs, made an official statement thanking Melania Trump for her great work to help the children of Russia and Ukraine that are caught up in the conflict. And Melania Trump gave a statement about how she's working with the Russian Children's Ministry. That's very good. Meanwhile, China came out today and they announced that they are putting export controls on all of the rare earth minerals and magnets that they control, right? There's certain minerals and magnets that China has pretty much control over, that they are manufactured in China. They are produced in China. And China has just announced that you can't export them without an official set of permissions from the Chinese government, that they're putting export controls, export regulations on these rare earth minerals. Donald Trump is furious about it. The U.S. Congress is furious about it, called it a declaration of war. So many things are happening. So many things are happening all of a sudden. So we got the USA threatening war against Venezuela, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee giving the Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who is a war regime change activist. We've got Putin and Trump complimenting each other. We've got Melania and the Russian government speaking very positively of each other. We've got China escalating, kind of pushing back with restrictions on the rare earth minerals and magnets and all of that. In other news, right, I mentioned that, Holy Mother Han, Hak Jahan Moon, she is, sitting in detention in South Korea. She's been formally indicted. She's going to go to trial. So they're not releasing her, even though a number of people have spoken up on her behalf, members of Congress, elected officials in the United States. And that case in South Korea with this 82-year-old religious leader sitting in a jail cell, absolutely insane over, some technicality about somebody gave somebody a handbag. That whole thing is crazy. That whole situation is crazy. Meanwhile, Letitia James, who is the New York State Attorney General, has been indicted for mortgage fraud. So Letitia James, she's a New York City politician who's horrible, absolutely horrible. She's an African-American woman, so that's, great for identity politics. But, she was very, very pro-NYPD until the Black Lives Matter, thing happened. And then it was really cool to take a photo op with the protesters. But she was totally pro-cop, totally pro-NYPD, rising up the ranks of New York City politics, big apologist for the police, until suddenly it became the cool thing to not do that, kind of like Kamala Harris. But then she ran for New York State Attorney General, saying that she was going to get Trump. Well, that's not how prosecutors are supposed to operate, right? You don't run for office saying, I am going to prosecute this individual. That is unethical. You're supposed to enforce the law. But, Trump is wildly unpopular in New York City. And, so she ran for New York State Attorney General. I'm going to get Trump. And we all know what she did. She tried to put Trump in jail to prevent him from running for president. And Trump was found guilty of misdemeanors The misdemeanors were, falsifying business records, which is a misdemeanor. But in New York State, there's a legal thing where if you falsify business records to cover up a felony, it can be a felony. And so Trump was convicted of falsifying business records to cover up a felony. They never explained what the felony was, but it was supposedly somehow some money was moved around, supposedly, again, not confirmed. Trump says he's never met Stormy Daniels, but supposedly to shut up Stormy Daniels, some money was moved somewhere and they wrote false things in the business records about where the money went. The whole thing is absurd, absolutely absurd. And so Trump was convicted of a felony of falsifying business records. Completely absurd, completely ridiculous. And so now that Trump is the president, he's obviously, it doesn't apply. He's, it's a felon in New York. Okay, who cares, right? He's the president, right? He didn't sit in jail. And so now Donald Trump and the Department of Justice have indicted Letitia James with mortgage fraud. Mortgage fraud. And it's another one of these financial things. I don't know if folks have read this book, right? This is a book that was recommended to me by a libertarian. It's called 3 Felonies a Day. 3 Felonies a Day, How the Feds Target the Innocent. And it basically says that in the federal government, at the federal level, there's only so much time, right? They don't have the time to go around and investigate every single crime that could possibly take place. However, when it comes to tax law, when it comes to finance law, you can get almost anybody for anything. And this book says that basically the average professional in the United States commits 3 felonies a day. And if you really want to get a lawyer, a doctor, a business owner, it's not that hard. And that's what they did to Trump. And so Trump, it appears, is taking his revenge. And when I heard Letitia James was indicted, I will just be honest with you all. I kind of feel guilty about this. I feel guilty about this because you should never wish harm on another person. But I smiled. I really did, because I said, you know what? Trump's fighting back. And that's actually, in terms of anti-imperialism, that's like the best hope we got. And I'm thinking, like, this is messed up. I shouldn't want, people to play lawfare games. What they did to Trump to try and prevent him from running for president was wrong. And it looks a lot like what Trump is doing is retaliation. He's trying to, protect himself from somebody who ran for office to get him, but, at this point, it appears that Trump is in a war with his own class. Trump is a Bonapartist. No, Trump is not a communist. No, Trump is not a socialist. Trump is not an anti-imperialist. Trump is a Bonapartist. He's at war with his own class. And that Trump represents a faction of the ruling class that has its own interests that are at odds with the rest of the class, of the ruling class. In particular, Trump isn't that concerned with hating Russia, or is possibly open to having a better economic relationship with Russia, possibly open to doing that. And the rest of the ruling class isn't, right? Is very opposed to it. So Trump, there's other differences, right? Trump is very much against the FBI and pro-ICE, and the rest of the ruling class loves the FBI and hates ICE. And there are differences, and these differences are not a matter of like moral right and wrong versus, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. It's simply, there are factions among the ruling elite that have different agendas, have different short-term economic interests, and they're fighting with each other. And Trump, they tried to throw him in jail to keep him from being president. And so now that Trump is the president, it looks like they're striking back. And, John McCarthy, to his credit, if you're watching, John, you're a brilliant, astute analyst. You said that this is possibly not a smart move for Trump, because what James Comey was indicted for doing, Russiagate, lying about the Russiagate indictment, that's a real crime. But this looks a lot more like blatant political retaliation. And And that's going to make it harder when Trump does go after. He's already going after James Comey. He raided the home. It looks like we're waiting for the indictment of John Bolton. And it's going to make it harder for the indictments of Comey and Bolton and the people who actually did commit crimes with the Russiagate hoax. It's going to make those charges less credible. That's a very fair argument. I think you might be right about that. That doesn't mean I can't be happy. When I heard that Trump had indicted Letitia James, that Pam Bondi had indicted Letitia James, I smiled because that means Trump is fighting back. But at the same time, you're right. Look, what the Russiagators did is they lied to the world and said Russia interfered in the U.S. elections. They whipped up this anti-Russian hysteria that prevented Trump from making peace with Russia in his first term, enabled the FBI to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story and got Trump defeated in the 2020 election, then got Biden into the White House, enabled Biden to raid the home of the Uhuru movement and drag black revolutionaries to jail, enabled Biden to escalate U.S., backing and hostility to Russia in Ukraine, and all set the stage for Russia to have a special military operation. And if that Russiagate hoax had not been perpetrated, if they had not lied about Russiagate, hundreds of thousands of people who are now dead would now be alive. Right? That this lie of Russiagate, perpetrated by James Comey, perpetrated by John Bolton, perpetrated by George Soros, that lie cost hundreds of thousands of lives. And the prosecution of James Comey, the prosecution of John Bolton, the prosecution of George Soros, potentially, he's not a U.S. citizen, but sanctions putting on him, that all is very good. And that is something that needs to happen. Letitia James, she engaged in dirty politics. She abused her position as a prosecutor to go after Trump. So now it looks like here comes the payback. And, I'm not an elected official, and I would not condone any politics of retaliation. I really would not. But, that's the game we're in. And, there's an old expression. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. You ever hear that expression? It's an old cowboy expression. Don't bring a knife to a gunfight. And this didn't have to be a gunfight. Could have been a knife fight, but the Democrats turned it into a gunfight. They turned it into a gunfight with the January 6th stuff, with the FBI setting up January 6th and the media deceiving us about January 6th and that whole thing, throwing all those Trump supporters in jail after January 6th. Going after Trump himself, going after the Uhuru movement, using this Russiagate hysteria to drag an 80-year-old African-American man into court. They made it a gunfight. And now it's a gunfight. And Trump is not going to bring a knife to a gunfight, right? If he's fighting people that are trying to throw him in jail to prevent him from running for office, when he gets into office, I mean, that's what it looks like to me. And, if I were a Republican, if I were, just a Trumper, I couldn't be saying that. I'd have to say, oh, no, what they did to Trump was unfair. But this is just Pam Bondi exercising the law. I'm not going to say that to you all. I'm going to be real to you all, right? This is political pushing and shoving, right? And they brought out the big guns. They tried to throw Trump in jail to keep him out of office. And so now Trump is, trying to put some people in jail that's how this works. It's called escalation. It's the nuclear arms race. If you build a giant missile, then he's got to build a giant missile, and then he's got to build an even bigger giant missile, and then you got to build a giant missile. That's how these things are played, right? That's how the game is played, right? It's a game of escalation. And I will say that part of the reason I smiled, I can't stand Letitia James. I really, really, really can't stand Letitia James. I was part of Occupy Wall Street. I was part of Occupy Wall Street, and there she was supporting the crackdown on Occupy Wall Street and the prosecution of Occupy Wall Street activists. And, when there were Trayvon Martin protests that happened a couple years after Occupy Wall Street, she was playing up the idea that this was a plot by the white activists to get your kids killed. And, she's rot. She is the rot of corruption in New York City politics. She is the Cuomo machine. She is Letitia James. Boo. 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 Right? Is that a thing you do? Is that like some gay man doesn't like somebody? He's like, boo. Oh my God, boo. right? But anyway, yeah, not a big fan of Letitia James. And so, and she ran for office promising to do something that's unethical and illegal, to abuse her position to go after a former president. She basically ran for office. Her entire campaign centered around, I will get into the New York State Attorney General office and I will use my position not to enforce the law fairly in the state of New York, but to go after a former president who we all hate here in New York, right? And not a big fan of hers. But I don't want to wish ill will on anybody. And that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like, as much as I rant against the political establishment, I want to make things better, right? I really don't want to see anyone locked in a prison cell. I really don't want to see anyone face punishment or, I'm not trying to harm people. I want to make things better. And, we're trying to maneuver within this political mess that we are in. We are in an utter political mess in this country, right? There's that video from the White House yesterday about Antifa. And there's some Antifa guy who wrote books about Antifa and he was trying to flee the country and they blocked his flight or something. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is messy. This is an utter disaster. And I've been warning about the danger of an American Years of Lead. That's the name of my book that I wrote about the Brian Thompson killing, about Luigi Mangione. I said, there's a danger of an American Years of Lead. And that's where we're at. I mean, we are facing the danger of an American Years of Lead. And we support the peace talks that happened in Alaska. We support the Russiagators being prosecuted because we want lying to get us into a war to be a crime. And what's happening off the coast of Venezuela, horrible. Giving the Nobel Peace Prize to somebody who's actively lobbying to have their home country invaded. I mean, I don't know. The Nobel Peace Prize is just an utter joke. Trump would deserve the Nobel Peace Prize far more than the woman who won it did. I'll just tell you that much. And she made a point of saying, and I accept it and I share it with Trump, because Trump is threatening to invade Venezuela. That's what we need. So she kind of gave Trump a, in her accepting of the Nobel Prize. But Putin said, Trump, you did stop a couple wars, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Cambodia, Thailand. You just did the Hamas. Trump deserves it far more than this woman does. I mean, Trump, supporting, bombing Iran, backing Israel. I mean, he's not really deserving of it himself either. But Trump, you could make a case. He did stop some wars. He did actively make peace. So he's much more worthy of it. Whereas this regime change activist, all she has done is go around the world saying, my government is a dictatorship. It sucks. USA, invade, bring down the regime. I want a regime change in my homeland. She's just a George Soros regime change activist. She's a Miami Cuban, basically. They might as well go to Miami, right? And, to stand on the streets of Miami and say, who hates Fidel Castro? I hate Fidel Castro. I hate Fidel Castro. I was a billionaire before Fidel Castro. Yeah. All right, here's the Nobel Peace Prize. Yay, give me Nobel Peace Prize, hating Fidel Castro. It's just the stupid, it's embarrassing. I will never take the Nobel Peace Prize seriously again. This is a joke. It's an utter joke to give the Nobel Peace Prize to a regime change activist, right? Unbelievable. Utterly unbelievable. And not randomly, they gave it to her at the moment that the USA is threatening to do what she wants and cast her homeland into a gigantic war, for Christ's sakes. They could have at least given it to her on the off year, my God. This is, the Nobel Peace Prize Committee should be called the Nobel War Committee. That's what they should call it, the Nobel War Committee, because that's what this is. It was just basically just calling for the overthrow of the government, right? It's just utterly ridiculous. I don't know. There's wild things. They made a documentary, about Milton Friedman, the economist. It's called Free to Choose, Milton Friedman, the neoliberal economist. And they interviewed President Ronald Reagan, for the documentary. And the documentary begins with a very large error. right? Ronald Reagan, President of the United States, praises Milton Friedman. He won the Nobel Peace Prize for economics. There is no Nobel Peace Prize for economics. There's the Nobel Peace Prize, and then there is the Nobel Economics Prize. He won the Nobel Economics Prize, but Ronald Reagan says he won the Nobel Peace Prize for economics. Oh, God. And they didn't think to edit that out of the PBS documentary. It's Ronald Reagan. He's the president of the United States, right? Oh, he won the Nobel Peace Prize for economics. How many people, millions of Americans, viewed that on PBS? There was no internet back then. So if you were on a main channel, people saw you. So millions of Americans turned on their TV and heard Ronald Reagan said, he won the Nobel Peace Prize for economics, a prize that does not exist. There is no Nobel Peace Prize for economics. There is a Nobel Economics Prize. There is a Nobel Peace Prize. But Reagan apparently did not know that there were other prizes. He'd heard about the Nobel Peace Prize. He was not aware that there were science prizes, that there were, economics prizes. So, oh boy. Yeah, they gave the Nobel Peace Prize to a woman trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. Completely stupid and ridiculous. But Trump is mad about it because he wanted it very badly. Putin congratulated Trump and said Trump should have gotten it. So it looks like we may actually be moving toward peace in Ukraine, which would be awesome, would be absolutely awesome. But anyhow, Venezuela, there was an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council today in which Venezuela spoke about what's going on and the threats that they're facing. This is the Venezuelan representative to the UN, basically letting the world know what the United States is doing right now. Here we go.
We come to this Security Council to lodge a complaint, one of the most serious complaints possible. We are here to alert this council to a series of actions that threaten not only peace and security in our nation, but also of the entire Latin American and Caribbean region. Mr. President, for years, the government of the United States has been conducting a propaganda and disinformation campaign against our country. At present, it is undertaking an escalating deployment of military forces mere miles from Venezuelan coasts. The military escalation involves the offensive mobilization of more than 10,000 troops, combat aircraft, missile destroyers and cruisers, assault troops, assets used in special operations and in covert missions, and even a nuclear submarine. The belligerent action and rhetoric of the US government objectively point to the fact that we are facing a situation in which it is rational to anticipate that in the very short term, an armed attack is to be perpetrated against Venezuela. That's why we're here, because this Security Council has the necessary means to prevent further worsening of the situation. We are here to avert the commission of an international crime. The Charter of the United Nations provides all of us here in this chamber with the means needed not only to confirm the existence of a threat, but also to be able to preserve regional and international peace and security.
Yeah, the UN Charter says that the threat of military force against another country is a crime. It violates the entire UN Charter for one country to say, we're thinking about invading you. That is, what the USA is doing against Venezuela is completely illegal, right? If Venezuela invaded the United States and they pushed back, that's one thing. But threatening to unilaterally attack or invade a country without the permission of the UN Security Council is completely illegal. It's completely illegal what the USA is doing to Venezuela right now. Completely illegal. And Venezuela is getting a huge amount of support throughout Latin America, from Russia, from China. I mean, even some European countries are supporting them. I mean, it's like Venezuela's got a lot of support because it's Trump doing it, and Trump is such a polarizing figure. But what the USA is doing, just, piling up their military forces right outside Venezuela is completely illegal under international law.
Should this body possess the political will to fulfill its mandate, it can use these means. The world is watching you today. Let's not betray those of us who placed our trust in the Security Council, because those of us who signed up to the UN Charter. President, the United States narrative has feet of clay. It bears no relation to reality. And indeed, since January this year, this government has sought to convince the world that Venezuelans right now, today, are carrying out an invasion on the territory of this country, that the presence of Venezuelans due to their nationality alone is contrary to US security, and that they are all terrorists. This is the criminalization of the entire Venezuelan people. Through this disinformation campaign, the United States government is attacking Venezuelans within and outside US territory. It considers them a threat, foreign enemies, and just a few days ago it declared that it was in the midst of an alleged non-international armed conflict with the sole aim of having carte blanche to wage war against Venezuela. All of this has been reaffirmed with impunity by the US government without a shred of evidence. Peace in the region is in grave danger on the basis of a fiction promoted by a warmongering government eager to attack an entire nation and its people. Mr. President, today we are all seeing the first tragic consequences of this reality that our region is facing. The United States government has recognized that thousands of kilometers from its own coasts, it has bombed 4 small vessels in the Caribbean, killing 21 unarmed civilians, which never posed any threat to national security. The United States government conceals its crimes under the guise of self-defense. In so doing, it murders civilians without providing information as to their identity, without proving the nature of the cargo aboard the vessels, and without providing any evidence on the imminent nature of an armed attack against U.S. forces.
Yeah, this ship, they've been sinking, they've sunk a couple different ships off the coast of Venezuela. And the president, they just say, oh yeah, they were drug dealers. And, well, first of all, right, we don't have the death penalty for being a drug dealer in America. Did you know that? You know, there are many crimes one can get the death penalty for. Being a drug dealer is not one of them. In Singapore, yeah, they can kill you for being a drug dealer, China, etc. But in America, you can't get the death penalty for being a drug dealer. They can lock you up for a long time, can't give you the death penalty. Second of all, even if they did have the death penalty for being a drug dealer, you'd have to have a trial first, right? You'd have to go before a jury of your peers and be found guilty. But instead, you know, Trump says, oh, you know, I, as president, I can say this ship, this little boat, there's drug dealers on it, kill them. And I mean, that's not legal. You cannot do that, right? And on top of that, I don't think they were drug dealers, because if they were actually drug dealers on the ship, they would seize the ship and use it as evidence to make their case that Venezuela is somehow responsible for America's drug problem, which it is not, right? Venezuela is inconsequential in the drug trade, according to the very documents of the Drug Enforcement Agency of the United States, according to the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. Venezuela, are there drug dealers there? Sure, you know, but as far as the international drug trade is concerned, they are inconsequential. And the USA has unilaterally murdered multiple Venezuelans who just happened to be on a boat, has not even revealed what their identity was. So we don't even know. Oh, they're drug dealers? Tell us their names. Tell us their names. They won't even tell us their names. It's completely illegal, and it's a provocation. They want Venezuela to shoot back, and then they can say, oh, look, and then they can launch a war. They're trying to provoke a war with Venezuela. And the world doesn't want it. Venezuela doesn't want it. South and Central America don't want it. Europe doesn't want it. Nobody wants it except the fucking Nobel Prize Committee. They seem to want it. The Nobel Peace Prize people, they want a war with Venezuela, but nobody else does. And yeah, it's absolutely outrageous.
is not self-defense. These are extrajudicial killings. There is a killer roaming in the Caribbean, one that is seeking excuses to manufacture a conflict, to attack, to manipulate the principle of self-defense, and he wants to kill more. There are procedures established around the world to combat drugs without killing the suspects. The United States is the only government that proclaims the principle shoot first and check later. Who could believe that this large-scale military escalation in the Caribbean is truly aimed at combating drugs trafficking? The truth is that the United States government, as has been confirmed by international media, has already issued a secret order to authorize the use of military force in foreign territory with the pretext of a false war against drugs trafficking. At the same time, the CIA has also been authorized to conduct clandestine operations across Latin America and the Caribbean. All points to a new hour of aggression in our region. President, the conflict doesn't exist. It is being manufactured by the United States, and the reason is as follows. While it is true that this country is facing a tragedy created by drug addiction, which is very regrettable, and one on which we stand ready to cooperate to address this grave public health situation, there is another dangerous addiction that remains unspoken here. This is the addiction to oil. The United States is desperate to control all of the sources of oil around the world, and it believes that Venezuelan oil belongs to it. Its desperate addiction, therefore, leads it to violate all norms of international law. We've seen this in Iraq, in Syria, in Libya, and in Afghanistan. But now is the time to prevent a new war, a war on Venezuela. If Venezuela did not have oil, the imminent military threat would not exist. The plan is clear.
Look at all the countries the USA has overthrown and invaded in the last few years, right? Iraq was a major oil exporting country. Libya was the top oil exporting country in Africa. Two major oil exporting countries. Look at all the countries that America doesn't like. Venezuela, the world's largest oil reserves. Russia, the world's largest oil exporter. Are you starting to notice a pattern here? You should be. You should be noticing a pattern here. You should be noticing a pattern here. And the idea that this is about drugs or this is about human rights for Venezuelans, I mean, my goodness, they bend over backwards to accommodate the opposition in Venezuela. Venezuela is not a dictatorship by any means, right? It is very, very much a country where the opposition and people that they don't even have the death penalty in Venezuela, for Christ's sakes. I mean, I've been to Venezuela. I have seen with my own eyes how much they tolerate people that are funded by the United States that want to overthrow them. They're on the TV channels. They're out in the streets. They're everywhere, right, in Venezuela. Opposition people flourish. There was a guy named Juan Guaido who, with the backing of the United States, declared himself the president of Venezuela. And the USA recognized him as the president of Venezuela, and they didn't arrest him. They didn't throw him in jail. He just walking around. Hey, look at me. I'm the president. Could you imagine if Iran or North Korea picked an American and said they're the president, right? And gave diplomatic recognition to somebody in America. And they said, you're the president of America. We don't recognize Trump. We recognize Joe Bob. Joe Bob would go to jail really, really fast. Okay. But the USA picked Juan Guaido and said, Juan Guaido, we recognize you as the president of Venezuela, not Maduro. And Juan Guaido was told, you can't leave the country because we're investigating you for trying to overthrow the government. And he said, and he went to America and he went all over South and Central America. Then he went back to Venezuela and nothing happened to him. And he walked around Venezuela saying, I'm the president. Look at me. I'm the president. And nothing happened to him. Now, is that country a dictatorship? How in the world is that a dictatorship? You know, I mean, give me a break. I mean, you're allowed to just blatantly work with a foreign country to try and overthrow the government. That obviously, you're given a travel ban because you're under investigation. You blow it off and go to the country that's trying to overthrow your country. And then you come back and they don't even do anything to you. But that's a brutal dictatorship. Venezuela, oh, the brutal, brutal dictatorship. Give me a break.
It's an attempt once again to undertake an operation that's already failed, which is to overthrow the legitimate and constitutional president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro Moros, in order to install a puppet regime and turn our country into a colony. Without presenting any evidence, the government of the United States is appointing itself both judge and executioner against an entire people. International law, however, also applies to the United States. It isn't an exceptional country. It is sitting around this table because it committed to upholding the United Nations Charter. Venezuela comes here today to demand that the government of the United States uphold its international obligations. The necessary means to resolve this situation do exist. Our country has always been and will always stand ready to engage in dialogue to overcome politically and diplomatically any difficulty to protect our region as a zone of peace. Something that we do need to discuss bilaterally and urgently relates to the repatriation of 78 Venezuelans abducted in the United States who have been separated from their families by a cruel and racist policy. Children cannot be used as hostages to extort Venezuela. President, what right does the United States have to militarize the Caribbean region? None. What right does the United States have to execute civilians that are entitled to the presumption of innocence and to due process? None. What right does the United States have to terrorize and deprive humble fishers from their livelihoods around the Caribbean region? None. The United States believes that the Caribbean belongs to it because for more than 100 years, it has been applying the voracious Monroe Doctrine, which is no more than a relic of colonialism. Our region has had first-hand experience of U.S. invasions. Throughout its 250-year history, the United States has only had 4 years of peace. And today it stands ready to set the Caribbean ablaze to uphold its ideology of endless war that its own people is rejecting. The United States promote...
Yeah, its own people are rejecting, and Trump won the election promising not to invade countries, promising no more toppling regimes. He was going to end wars, not start them. And it looks like he's on the brink of starting a war in Venezuela. Yeah, and the American people voted for him to do the opposite. Kamala, on the other hand, she wanted more war, but Trump said he would end the wars, and the American people voted for him, promising to do the opposite of what he is doing now.
War with a machine of propaganda and a true industry of death and lies. Many people have been the victims of this at some time or other, of its greed at some time or other. How many deaths will have to happen? How many years will have to pass before the entire world understands, as it has done historically, that today the United States is lying once again? Venezuela, for its part, has a profound tradition of peace. Since its independence more than 2 centuries ago, it has never been involved in an international conflict, and it is proud of this history. We do not need, nor do we seek, war against anyone. President, in light of all of this, we believe that the time has come for this Security Council to fulfill the mandate entrusted to it by the United Nations Charter and to avert a catastrophe that could destabilize the region for generations. Therefore, we propose the following 3 specific measures to this Council. Firstly, that the Council determine the existence of a threat to international peace and security due to the current military escalation by the United States in the Caribbean. Second, that the Council adopt the necessary measures to avoid the situation on the ground worsening further. And third, that the Council adopt a resolution in which all of its members, including the United States, commit to respecting the sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. We are just asking for compliance with the Charter of the United Nations that we all committed to.
It's pretty basic. You don't have the right to threaten military force against another country. You just don't have the right to do it. And the idea that, Venezuela, people who fled Venezuela, narco criminals who fled Venezuela, that constitutes an invasion by Venezuela. That's not accurate. And the idea that, there might be a drug gang there, which, that's not, no, there's no legal basis for what the USA is doing. What the USA is doing against Venezuela is a huge, huge violation. It is one of the most blatantly illegal things, Russia's military operation in Ukraine was something they tried their hardest to avoid doing at all costs. I mean, this is just the United States saying, you know what? I don't like Venezuela, so we're going to threaten a war. Not legal at all. Venezuela has done absolutely nothing to the United States.
In this Security Council, taking these measures would be a guarantee to immediately diffuse the threat in our region. We all need peace, including the United States. President, before concluding, allow me to address a few words to our people who at this time are living in perfect peace, united and mobilized in the face of the dangers confronting our homeland. At this critical juncture for our history, all Venezuelans remember our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and all of those who fought to maintain a country in peace with prosperity and, above all, with dignity. Venezuelans are proud of being Venezuelans. We don't seek tutelage from any empire. With great sacrifice, we have forged a country which is not subordinated to anyone. We aspire to have friendly, cooperative relations with the entire world based on mutual respect. But we will not accept insults or threats from anyone. Venezuelans do not yield to blackmail. Those who confuse our readiness for dialogue with weakness are mistaken. In our more than 200 years of history, if anyone believes that they can crush us because we are a small country, they should look back to the past and see that Venezuela was the grave of an empire. The Charter of the United Nations and the doctrine of universal peace protects Venezuela and all countries around the world. As guaranteed by Article 51 of the Charter, if Venezuela is attacked, it will then exercise its legitimate right to self-defense. We respect the United States. We respect its people who desire peace. But we warn the world that if the United States were to attack Venezuela and its people, if the United States were to profane our territory, we have the sacred duty to defend what is ours, what we have inherited from our ancestors, and that we safeguard for our children and our grandchildren. Venezuela is ours. It is not the United States. We are sure that the world will understand that in the face of an attack, we will exercise with all of the strength and the love of our homeland our right to self-defense, and even if this struggle takes generations, we will prevail. Venezuela will continue to win peace, exercising its full sovereignty and guaranteeing the right to life. Thank you very much, President.
Yeah, that was Venezuela before the UN Security Council, speaking common sense, speaking basic common sense. You don't have the right to invade us. Right? You're mad at some migrant criminals who fled our country after being in prison and went to your country and messed up. That's not a basis. You're sinking our ships. You're sinking ships full of people. You don't even tell us who those people are, but you say they're drug dealers. That's justified. You're building up a military force off the coast of our country. You're threatening to attack us. All of that is illegal, and we will defend ourselves, right? And, look, I'm just going to be real with you all for a minute. I've been to Venezuela and I've seen it for myself. And I haven't just been to Caracas. I have been to rural parts of Venezuela. I've been to the national parks. I've been to the mountains. I've been to a some of the collectivo farms where they grow chocolate, they have cacao beans or whatever. And I've seen Venezuela. That is a mountainous country. And in Venezuela, they've got guns. I don't know where people get this idea that communist governments, they don't have guns. They've all got guns in Venezuela, right? The Bolivarian militias have over 2 million members. They have the official army that is trained in Cuba. And all of those mountains are full of people that have guns. And Venezuela will turn into a graveyard of American soldiers. And if Trump were to go ahead and invade Venezuela, the body count of Americans would be massive. There would be lots and lots of young American men and women coming home in body bags. Yes, conservatives think Maduro took all the guns. I don't know what they're smoking. Maduro gives out guns in big numbers, and the people there have them, and they're all trained in how to use them, and they're up in the mountains, and it's like the Houthis, right? They're ready to fight. And if Trump actually thinks he's going to invade Venezuela and not go down as a foolish president, as a hated president, he's delusional, right? And Trump has a lot of support among the military, but those military folks are anti-war. They voted for him because they can see these wars don't benefit us in any way. And the drug dealer thing doesn't add up, right? And you really want to go get Americans killed to overthrow a Marxist socialist government in a country that's done nothing to us? Like, I just don't see it happening, right? And I really, really hope that Trump is bluffing here. He's letting Marco Rubio push it right up to the line. There was some of this in the last term of Trump. He played around with Venezuela with John Bolton and Elliott Abrams and Mike Pompeo, and then he backed away from it. And you'll notice Mike Pompeo and John Bolton both turned against him. But Marco Rubio is our Secretary of State. He's part of the Miami Mafia. And I've been to Venezuela. I have seen it. I have seen it up close. I have studied the Bolivarian Revolution in great detail. And I'm traveling next week, right? It looks like. I mean, again, a lot of things are up in the air, but I'm traveling. I'm intending to travel next week. And while I'm gone, I have prepared a video that's going to premiere on this channel that is called 7 Hours of Venezuela Solidarity. 7 hours of solidarity with Venezuela. It is all of the different videos I've made, videos from Venezuela when I was there and saw what was happening in the country up close, videos of me arguing with right-wing Venezuelans outside the United Nations, Venezuelans who want the USA to overthrow Maduro and exposing that they are full of shit. Debating people. I on Press TV, I debated an anti-Maduro Venezuelan on international television and debunked her arguments. And 7 hours of all kinds of information about Venezuela. That video will premiere on Tuesday. That's one of the videos I premiere every day while I'm gone. Next week, there will be a really long video premiering on this channel. So stay tuned for that. But in light of all of that, I am just going to show you some of the videos, some of what I saw in Venezuela when I was there in 2015. I might as well just show you some of what I got. This is a short film that I made. Keep in mind my filmmaking skills. This was 10 years ago. We're not what they are now, but this is a short film I made called Inside a Bolivarian Commune. I will show you some of it, and I might show you some other stuff. But yeah, I've been to Venezuela. I've lectured. I have a lecture about their revolution and its history at St. John's University. I was a guest speaker. I've got a lot of stuff. So here we go.
We're here in Commune Pinal. This means Commune Beehive. It's one of the strongholds of the Bolivarian Revolution. It's one of the communal cities that's been set up. It's here in the center of Caracas. Here all the people live collectively, and they are strong supporters of the revolution, and they're trying to build collective businesses and ownership over the economy. It's quite an inspiring place to be at Beehive Commune.
sobre Guerra Fría, toda esa cosa, ¿no? Y exactamente en 1989, el 27 de febrero, Venezuela da en el mundo el primer símbolo de rechazo contra políticas neoliberales que pasó acá, que se llamó el Caracazo.
So in 1989, Fukuyama talked about the end of history and how capitalism had triumphed in the world. Yeah. But also in 1989, the 4th of February of 1989, el 4 de febrero? 27 de febrero. I'm sorry, 27th of February of 1989, Venezuela gave an example to the world that was not true, with the Caracazo. The rebellion.
Sí, fue la primera expresión contra el neoliberalismo.
So that was the first battle against neoliberalism.
Y el 4 de febrero de 1992 insurge Chávez, hijo de esa conmoción de lo que fue el 27 de febrero.
So in February 4th, 1992, Chávez led a rebellion that basically came out of that insurrection in 1989.
Con mucho tacto y muy inteligente, Chávez no se iba a poner ortodoxo de una mesada.
Es delicioso.
This here behind me is the radio and TV station. It's run out of the Beehive Commune here. It's where they kind of broadcast revolutionary messages all over the country. It's collectively run by the people who live here in the commune. So we're outside of Colectivo Radio 23. This is one of the community radio stations that's been set up as part of the Bolivarian process of creating media that isn't controlled by the big corporations and the rich, but is actually accountable to the community. This is Colectivo Radio 23.
No, yo no sé cuál es la intencionalidad.
Yeah, they have a picture there of Bashar Assad, the leader of Syria, and Ahmadinejad, the president of Iran. So that's the community radio station there in Venezuela, in this Colectivo, run by Christian socialists, actually. It was a religious Colectivo. The ties with Iran are very close. Venezuela and Iran are very, very close.
Mira, Glenn, te presento a mis amigos.
It'll be premiering on this channel. 7 hours of solidarity with Venezuela. My interviews, my debates, all kinds of stuff. I have seen that country up close, and Trump needs to just back away from this and not let Marco Rubio trick him into being a regime change president. and 7 hours of Venezuela solidarity while I'm traveling. That'll be on Tuesday. I've got all kinds of mega videos that are going to show. I've got 7 hours debunking Trotskyism, 8 hours exposing Kamala Harris, all kinds of videos that every day that I'm gone, I'm going to be gone for 5 or 6 days. There's going to be a video that premieres on this channel. So stay tuned. It'll be, just use it as background noise, basically. That's the idea. Use it as background noise. That's the idea. Now, also, I have written about Venezuela. I've been there, and I've studied their revolution and its history. I was invited to special events at their embassy before it closed down, back when they had like formal relations with the United States. And, they invited me to lectures about their environmental programs and about the George Soros color revolution attempt against them called La Salida. And, I've studied Venezuela quite up close. And so I actually have published a book compiling all my different writings about Venezuela. And it's available. It's called The Siege Has Failed. That's the name of my book on the Bolivarian Revolution in Venezuela. It's basically a compilation of the various articles that I've written about Venezuela. The Siege Has Failed: Why Venezuela Stands Strong Against Globalism, Imperialism. So if you're interested in reading stuff, right? Some people read, some people don't, right? That's one thing I've realized. I read books, but I don't read the same way other people do, especially nonfiction. First of all, I don't read fiction at all. I read nonfiction, and I read it I get what I need out of the books, right? That's kind of my style. But, some people, they read every word. They feel like they have to read a book kind of like they're watching a movie. They read every word and, all that. So some people read, some people don't. But if you, if you want to get the book, The Siege Has Failed, this is the book. This is the link, but I've done a lot to support Venezuela over the years. And actually, little known tidbit of information. I guess I'll just show one more video about Venezuela before we move on to the other thing I wanted to talk about here tonight. Nicolas Maduro, the leader of Venezuela, mentioned a rally that the Center for Political Innovation organized in a speech, which I think is an amazing achievement, an absolute amazing achievement on our part. It's something I'm very, very, very proud of, and I will show that that video. This was after the diplomat Alex Saab, Venezuelan diplomat, was seized by the U.S. government. We had rallies to free Alex Saab, and the very day that he was taken to Miami, kidnapped and taken to Miami, we had a rally in Times Square. And so that night, Nicolas Maduro gave a speech, and he said, and today there was a rally in Times Square. So here you go.
Alex Saab en las manos de Dios. Y habrá justicia, porque habrá verdad. Secuestrado por el imperio norteamericano. Y con la palabra de Dios y la palabra de los pueblos hay que levantar un poderoso movimiento de solidaridad por la verdad y la libertad de Alex Saab en Venezuela y en el mundo entero. Un poderoso movimiento de solidaridad por la verdad, la justicia y la libertad del diplomático venezolano Alex Saab en todo el mundo. Hoy ya en Estados Unidos hubo la primera marcha, la primera movilización en Nueva York. Allá se movilizaron los movimientos sociales, ya despertando y difundiendo el secuestro que se ha hecho de este diplomático venezolano.
Kiki Dewar, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation. I was sent here on behalf of Caleb Maupin, and I just want to say that we should be completely against the illegal extradition agreement that Cape Verde made with the United States to bring Alex Saab to Miami.
A Venezuelan diplomat, Alex Saab, who was on a humanitarian mission for his country, Venezuela, was kidnapped, arrested, and illegally extradited to the U.S. at the request of...
Out here today in solidarity with the Venezuelan people, because at this hour as well, they're having mobilizations out in Caracas against what just occurred right now with this kidnapping. this foreign diplomat was abducted by our own government, and this guy Alex Saab, this diplomat, was just on a humanitarian mission to transport food and medicines to his people in Venezuela as a way to break the blockade that our country has on Venezuela.
Why did they do this?
Yeah, and it was a big struggle, and eventually Alex Saab was freed, and we did a lot of work for Alex Saab. We had rallies all over the country, national days of action. We went on a postering campaign. Posters were put up all across New York City. I think the statute of limitations has been lifted or whatever, right? But, I don't know exactly how the posters got put up on the wall. I guess they just kind of, appeared on the wall, but a lot of CPI posters were pasted up across New York City calling for the freedom of Alex Saab. I have no idea how they were put up, but, I would not want, posters to be put up, that's illegal. But yeah, we did a lot to support Alex Saab, and eventually it worked. Alex Saab was extradited, and, it was a great honor that the very day that Alex Saab was extradited, we had a rally in Times Square, and Nicolas Maduro mentioned a rally in Times Square in New York in his speech. He shouted out our rally in his speech. Look, folks, CPI is the real deal. Okay, right? There's a lot of people that are screwing around on the internet that have been boosted by the enemy, right? People who've been advertised by the Israeli government that are just frauds. They're just frauds, okay? We're the real deal. We're the real deal. There's a reason that I have spoken directly with the Russian President Putin. There's a reason that I spoke with Alexander Dugin way back in 2018 and got canceled for it, There's a reason that I interviewed face-to-face the president of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. There's a reason that we have gone out of our way to support North Korea. I could just list, right? In this book, we'll show you. We have a timeline of CPI activities in here. We're the real deal. The Center for Political Innovation is the real deal. We're so real that the establishment has made phony us's to try and promote it, people. We are the real thing, okay? There's a lot of frauds out there. There's a lot of phonies, but we do it, and we're doing real shit. We're doing real shit. Today I was on the phone with a member, a CPI member out in LA, and there was some other group, some communist group in LA that was claiming they had 80 to 90 members in Los Angeles. And he said, either one, they're lying, or number two, that means absolutely nothing. Where are these members, right? Our members in LA, we have 4 or 5, but they're out every day with signs. They're out, every weekend with signs supporting peace talks, with Russia. Thank you, Tulsi, leafleting, handing out books. Our members are doing shit. So if this group has 80 to 90 members in LA, what the fuck are they doing, right? So either they're lying or they're just a completely worthless organization. I think they're probably both. They're both liars and a worthless organization. We're the real thing. If you want to be a real anti-imperialist, if you want to march in the streets for Ibrahim Traore, if you want to hand out books telling people who the Houthis really are and why they are a group fighting and standing for the people of Yemen, if you want to be in the organization that's been shouted out by Nicolas Maduro, we're the group to join. We're the real deal. We're the real deal. And I just feel like saying that, right? We've been shouted out literally by Nicolas Maduro. I'm heading out of town next week, but anyway, I did want to mention one other news item, but before I do that, I do want to make clear to everybody that I will be taking questions in the second half of the show, and the best way to send those questions for the second half of the program would be buy me a coffee. That's the best way to send your questions. Somebody already has, Kate Johnson, and I appreciate it, but please send more questions for the second half of the program. We also do Rumble Rants. You can also cash at me. But yeah, we're taking questions for the second half of the show. All right. So the other thing I wanted to mention is that, so this year is the 80th anniversary of World War II. There was a big celebration in Russia, huge parade in Russia. Then after that, there was a huge parade and a huge celebration in China. And now the latest one is that North Korea is having their big celebration of the victory in the Second World War and the founding of North Korea. North Korea was founded immediately after the end of the Second World War, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. And they had a great big celebration. And what came across in that celebration is Russia and North Korea are closer than ever right now because of the fact that both countries have been brutally threatened by the United States. Both countries are fighting for their lives. They both are fighting for the legacy of anti-fascism. And they are cooperating militarily. North Koreans fought and died to deflect the Kursk incursion when the Ukrainians invaded Russian territory. So I want to show you. So Medvedev, the former president of Russia, Medvedev, right, who is the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev. He was the president and the prime minister, and he's a very, very important Russian political figure. He was in North Korea for their celebrations. And so I want to show you a couple of his remarks, just briefly show you some of his remarks. And then I just want to show you some of the amazing celebrations they had. So yeah, they took him there, and he laid flowers on the commemoration of those in North Korea who died fighting Japan. Yeah, and so I'm going to show you some of his remarks while he was there, and then we'll just show you some of the epic parade that they had. So here is Dmitry Medvedev.
Касается визита в Корейскую Народно-Демократическую Республику, то он был посвящен большому празднику корейского народа, юбилею Трудовой партии Кореи, которой исполнилось 80 лет. Я, как глава делегации, принял участие в мероприятиях. Это были и праздничные мероприятия, и переговоры. Значит, переговоры по партийному направлению, естественно, ну и в целом по вопросам нашего многостороннего стратегического партнерства с КНДР. Прежде всего хочу отметить, что состоялись полноценные переговоры с генеральным секретарем Трудовой партии Кореи, председателем государственных дел, товарищем Ким Чен Ыном. Они прошли в дружественной атмосфере, которая характеризует наши многолетние отношения. Я передал привет и наилучшие пожелания лидеру КНДР от президента Российской Федерации. Их встречи носят регулярный характер. Это тоже происходит практически по нескольку раз в год. Недавно такая встреча была в сентябре. Ну а в ходе сегодняшней встречи мы обменялись впечатлениями как от развития наших многоплановых теперь отношений, так и от той обстановки, которая в настоящий момент сложилась в мире, напряженной обстановки. Эта обстановка касается и Российской Федерации, которая вынуждена проводить специальную военную операцию, и Корейской Народно-Демократической Республики, которая находится в состоянии повышенной готовности уже много лет из-за известной позиции недружественных стран.
All right. I'll show you another comment. It's the Workers' Party of Korea. So in North Korea, the ruling party is not the Communist Party. So what happened is, after World War II, there were a number of countries that were liberated from the Nazis or from the Japanese by Soviet troops or by communists, right? North Korea was liberated by Chinese and Korean and Soviet troops fighting the Japanese invaders. And there were three political parties in North Korea that had opposed Japan and been part of the armed fight against Japan. And they were the Communist Party and the Social Democratic Party and the Christian Party. And after World War II was over, they all merged into one party, which is the ruling party of North Korea. It's called the Korean Workers' Party. And it is the party of the workers, the industrial workers, the peasants, the farmers, and the intellectuals. And their symbol, the symbol of the Korean Workers' Party is a hammer for the industrial workers. It is a farm, plow or a hoe for the farmers, and it is a paintbrush, like a pen, like a paintbrush for the industrial workers or for the intellectuals. The Korean Workers' Party. I will put their symbol right on here so that you can know what it stands for. But it's a party, right? The Communist Party would be the party of only the working class, only the industrial workers, the party of the proletariat. Whereas the other classes that are represented, and so it's the Workers' Party. And that was the format of what they called People's Democratic governments that were formed after World War II. In East Germany, in Romania, Czechoslovakia, in China, eventually they had these People's Democratic governments, they called them. And the People's Democracies, they were called, they merged the Communist Party and all the anti-fascist parties into one party. And now this is the symbol of the Korean Workers' Party. There's the hammer for the factory worker, the hoe or the sickle for the farm worker, and the pen, right? The ink pen, the paintbrush ink pen thing for the intellectuals. And that's the logo of the Korean Workers' Party, which is the ruling party of Korea, which was a merger of the Social Democratic Party, the Communist Party, and the Christian Party, all in one. All three of the parties that fought the Japanese occupiers. But I will show you a little bit more of what Medvedev said, and then we'll just watch some of the really awesome celebrations, right? Because there were some pretty awesome parades and stuff. Here we go.
Истинный характер отношений и между людьми, и между странами проявляется в период испытаний. Это в полной мере относится и к союзничеству наших стран. Мы признательны Корейской Народно-Демократической Республике за твердую поддержку специальной военной операции. Наши бойцы плечом к плечу освобождали Курскую область. Этот подвиг навсегда сохранится в наших сердцах.
Yeah, that North Korea protected Russia. When the Ukrainians went into Kursk, North Korea saw their neighbor, their friend, their trading partner, their ally Russia being not just having to fight a special military operation in the Donbass, but actually facing the Kursk incursion. And so Kim Jong-un said, we are sending in the troops. And North Korea sent soldiers to fight on the battlefield to drive the Ukrainian US-backed Nazi invaders out of Kursk. And North Koreans gave their lives to defend Russia. Absolutely amazing. And now on the 80th anniversary of the Korean Workers' Party, they're having a big parade. So they had a big kind of show in an auditorium first, and then they had big parades. So here's some of the show. But you ain't seen nothing yet. This show got wilder, right? North Korea, they're really into bodybuilders and physical strength. So as the show continued, it got crazier. And they actually did a thing, where they started showing off the strength of their soldiers. They had like a sledgehammer thing where they were like hitting each other with sledgehammers to show how like buff they are. This is wild. So this is how the military show to commemorate the founding of the Korean Workers' Party got going. Here we go. So do you see what those guys are doing? Those are steel beams that they have below their necks, and they are pressing them together, right? That is not an easy thing to do. They are using their necks, their neck and chest to press steel beams together. They're placing boards on their chests, and they are breaking the boards with sledgehammers on their chests. Yeah, that's pretty wild. So then after the big show, they had a parade to commemorate the victory over Japan. And quite a good show. Here we go. Women dancing with swords. Intercontinental ballistic missiles. Yeah. No, it gets better. I mean, it was quite a show, and it will keep going, right? We got a few more videos of the parade. Pretty wild. There's the fireworks. Fireworks going off as the ICBMs are rolling by. They're intercontinental ballistic missiles. Right. All right. I mean, again, quite a show, quite a show. Yeah, I mean, just utterly amazing. Couple more videos of the show, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, don't mess with North Korea. I mean, look at this, right? They are ready to defend themselves. That's what I'm taking from that, from all of that, right? That is the 80th anniversary of the founding of the Korean Workers' Party. And it's quite good. And I will tell you also, right? I really do recommend studying the writings of Kim Il Sung, Kim Jong Un, Kim Jong Il. I recommend reading their work because it speaks about socialism in very plain and clear language. And I have some North Korean books, that North Koreans gave me when I went to the World Youth Festival. Right, this is the history of the revolutionary activities of Kim Il Sung. This is like a biography, an official biography of Kim Il Sung. It's quite good. You learn all about him and where he came from, and it's got a big picture of Kim Il Sung in the front. Very, very good stuff. But yeah, I have said many times, someone's in the chat is asking me where to start, right? I would recommend one of the best documents that I have ever read, and I'm repeating myself, and I apologize to everyone who's already heard this before. I think Kim Il Sung's radio speech that he gave, the 21-point platform in 1932, right? The 21-point platform radio speech that he gave to the Korean people, announcing the agenda of the Korean Workers' Party, 21 points that they stood for, is brilliant. How could you be against these points, right? It's just 21 things that North Korea, the Korean Workers' Party stands for, that this new provisional government they set up, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, it's their 21-point platform. And it shows you that often, the revolution doesn't take power on that radical of a principle, right? It takes power on rather modest demands that the system cannot accommodate. And so, volume 1 of the Korean Workers of Kim Il Sung's writings, it has the 21-point platform, and it's quite good. Now, there are other things in Kim Il Sung's writings. I mean, he talks about all kinds of things: the duty of mothers in the education of Korean children, improving and strengthening the ideological work of the party, right? Economic work, the tasks of the party in organizing in the provinces. Our People's Army is an army of the working class, an army of the revolution. The class and political education should be continuously strengthened. These are important writings. There's a very good piece by Kim Jong-il about why the Soviet Union fell that I would recommend. It's called Abuses of Socialism Cannot Be Tolerated. That's a great essay. It's about why the Soviet Union fell. Abuses of socialism are intolerable, right? Go and read that. Kim Jong-il's brilliant pamphlet explaining the fall of the Soviet Union, about how the corruption and bureaucratism led to the fall of the Soviet Union. Very, very brilliant. You can read the PDF of it there from the Marxist Internet Archive. Very, very good stuff. There's a lot there. But, I want to say that one thing I am very, very, very proud of is that our organization, the Center for Political Innovation, no organization in America can hold a candle to us, at least in this time, when it comes to solidarity with North Korea. We have been out there. During the election, we launched our Peace MAGA campaign. We were on the streets of New York City with a big banner. Only peace can make America great again. Phil was there with us, and Briggy and Noah on the first day. And then, the Japanese religious community was out there with me on the second day we were out there. And then we were out in front of Madison Square Garden with Red Illuminati and with Phil and with all kinds of people. And We waged an all-out campaign during the election saying we want Trump to make peace with North Korea. Only peace can make America great again. We were even mentioned in the New Yorker. And then we were in New Yorker magazine. They highlighted the fact that outside of Trump's inauguration rally, his big rally in Madison Square Garden, there was CPI, and we were there, saying only peace can make America great again. But we then went to Trump's inauguration, and we were at Donald Trump's inauguration, bringing our message of friendship with North Korea. And there were a group of Koreans who were there, Korean politicians, who all wanted to take a picture with our banner. And one by one were lining up. It was a beautiful moment. All these Koreans, that were there, wealthy Koreans that were there to watch Trump's inauguration. They saw our beautiful banner of Trump shaking hands with Kim Jong-un, and they all wanted to get their picture. It was an absolutely beautiful moment. And Gabby was on the bullhorn, and Noah was on the bullhorn, and our team, it was freezing cold in January of this year. And our team, we made a splash, and we were all over international television with our big banner, only peace can make America great again. And we distributed thousands of pamphlets about solidarity and anti-imperialism. It was a really great day. So I'm going to show you our inauguration day Peace MAGA operation. We had a big banner about the Peace Bridge, connecting the United States with Russia, through Alaska over the Bering Sea. This was our inauguration day in the cold. And thanks to everybody. We have such a great team in CPI. We have such a great team. Here we go. Big crowd of people, huge crowd of people here to support Donald Trump, pouring in to watch the inauguration ceremony in the Capital One Arena. Yeah, set up here, over there. How you feeling? How you feeling?
I'm good. It was fun to pass out pamphlets at the hotel there. Everybody was asking for more.
Great.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We need to heal America as well. We need to pray for America. We need to make our country great again. We need to take over. The people need to take over to make our country better again. And I hope Trump can help us with that.
Donald Trump for one of the greatest moments of his first presidency, when he went to a country that America has technically been at war with since the 1950s and gave peace a chance. We want to make peace around the world.
You're with Russia, Iran, Brazil instead of EU, traditional American allies.
Rather than the bankers in London or in Wall Street who are trying to plunge us into poverty, who are trying to hold on to their system rather than trying to build up our economy and economies around the world, making people poorer, degrowing society. We want to stand with the countries of the world that want to build economies.
We need a government of action to fight for working families.
If he could come and set a peace treaty with Israel and Gaza, they can stop massacring and genocide the Palestinian people, I will call him the greatest president in history.
I think that Donald Trump is the man to bridge the gap between China and North Korea and Russia and the U.S.
I hope he is. I mean, when he was in office the first time, he did an amazing thing by visiting North Korea. That was awesome. However, I really didn't like what he did when he murdered Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian leader. I thought that was a huge blunder. It almost brought us to the brink of World War III. And so I'm concerned. I hear a lot of good things coming out of Donald Trump right now. And the fact that the TikTok founder is at the inauguration right now, the fact that he brought peace. Biden was always saying he wanted a ceasefire, but he wasn't able to make it happen. Biden was weak, but Trump was able to force Netanyahu to accept a ceasefire deal.
But I'd love to see, production happen in America again. I'd love to see, solid jobs, right, that aren't these sort of like financial information things, but it's really a stable, solid thing.
We want to hire the China Railroad Company to build high-speed rail across America. We want to work with Russia. We want to build railroads from Alaska across the Bering Sea, etc. Because there's nothing for us to gain in trying to prevent these countries from joining with the world economy.
And I think it should be a partnership. We should hire American workers. We should hire American companies, and it should be a joint operation. For example, nuclear power. I'm a big fan of nuclear power, right? If we're going to get off in fossil fuels, we're not going to get off it with windmills and solar panels. We need to go to something higher, and China is leading the world in fusion energy research right now. That's why China just got helium-3 from the moon, is because they want to do fusion energy research.
It would be good for Americans to be able to trade with them, and if we want the situation in those countries to get better, we should want to trade with them, because there's nothing for us to influence them by trying to beat them down and tell them that they're doing things wrong. We've seen that doesn't work.
Kamala wasn't a good choice, you know what I'm saying? And then they play the identity politics too much. That's really getting played out in 2025. Identity politics, trying to play the white and black game, divide and conquer. You know, we live in the internet state. That's played out. That's very played out.
We need a more stable economy and society that's good for families, right? That's good for business, and not one that is just, you know, totally chaotic.
Maybe joining the BRICS economy, not trying to keep them in poverty. Keeping them in poverty keeps Americans in poverty. We need to be building the economy of the world.
This idea that smaller is better, and that it's better if we have less, and we just, you know, we just got to go back to nature and all that. That's pessimistic, horrific Malthusian thinking. Growth is the answer. Human beings are always inventing and reinventing our way we've interacted with our environment. Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for thousands of years. Beavers have been making their beaver dams the same way. But just 5,000-6,000 years, human beings have gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones. Human beings are amazing. We have creative power that is amazing. And now is not the time to be pessimistic. We need to believe in growth.
So you're not concerned about climate change or anything like that?
I think climate change is certainly a concern, but the answer is to go higher, right? If fossil fuels aren't working out, we need to get something better than fossil fuels. The answer is not to go backward. Human beings never go backward.
Should we let Iran get the nuke?
Iran has said several times that they do not want nuclear bombs. Do I think that they should be allowed to have peaceful nuclear energy? Absolutely, and they've been completely compliant with, with nuclear non-proliferation treaty. Unlike some of our allies, like Israel.
They're trying to arrest Donald Trump, all the fake charges, indictments on him, the attempt assassination. I think all that plays with the common people. The common people ain't stupid. And then, you know, we love to turn fake news. You know, I never heard a president describe the news like that.
The overwhelming majority of the American people do not want a new war. Yet the criminals like Biden and the neocons, etc., have been trying to push for wars around the world to hold on to their dying system. Only peace will make America great again.
People are not fooled. They got fooled with Obama. Most of my people say, oh, you fooled me with Obama. You won't fool me again.
It's like when they interview Kamala and she goes, you know, what are you going to do different from Biden? And she says, nothing. Like a total softball. It's like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to change anything. So people are like, yeah, no.
Who will help to dismantle the deep state that is oppressing not only Americans, but the people of the world. We need to be developing our economy, not tearing it down with degrowth and destruction. Only peace will make America great again.
If we were still burning wood to heat our homes, we would have deforested the planet many, many times over. But we don't. Now we started burning coal, now we burn fossil fuels. We're reinventing our relationship with nature. That's the nature of humanity.
The neocons who are in opposition to Trump, the John Boltons, etc., they have said that, well, if Trump comes into office, that'll be the end of NATO. Well, I think that would be a great thing. What do we have to gain by arming countries in Europe, continuing to fund their militaries so that they can have free healthcare and our citizens can go and die on the steps of a hospital? It's completely unfair and stupid.
Donald Trump, he can't be president again because there's only 2 terms allowed in the Constitution. However, he wants to be remembered as a great leader. That's what Donald Trump wants to be remembered as. So to be a great leader, he needs to stand up to Wall Street, he needs to stand up to the war makers, he needs to fight for working families here in America.
What would you say to the people who call Trump a fascist, say that we're in danger of losing our democracy?
I think they just don't have any historical perspective to know what they're saying. I mean, that's just factually untrue.
Do you think Donald Trump can bring peace to Korea? Can he bring peace to Korea? Do you support the banner? You like it?
Hope that President Trump can contribute to denuclearize North Korea and talk to Kim Jong-un and have some the conversation and then bring the peace on the Korean peninsula.
Yeah, you're happy to see this?
Yeah.
of the people in their millions are the makers of history, not the elites on Wall Street, not the Bidens of the world, the neocons who want to keep you poor so that they can stay rich. Only peace will make America great again.
Yeah, that's us. That's the Center for Political Innovation. We are the real deal, folks. We are the real deal. Got this book about everything we did in 2025. And it's funny, there's 2 more months. We're going to have a lot that we can't even include in here, but it's got, the transcription of all the speeches from the convention and our inauguration event and all of that in here. Great booklet that's now available. Yeah, join the Center for Political Innovation. We will put you to work. We will build. It is time to build an anti-imperialist movement in America. We have distributed over 2,000 copies of this book throughout this year. Who are the Houthis? What are they fighting for? Telling people the truth about it. We exposed Kamala Harris. I mean, we have done so much. We have really, really done so much. We're a real organization of really, really dedicated people. We are anti-imperialists. This imperialist system where greed of big monopolies comes before basic human people, basic human values, that needs to be overturned, right? Only peace can make America great again. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That is what we urgently need in this country. A government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That is what we need. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And we have gotten this message out far and wide. And we've got big plans for 2026. We're kicking off the year with a big event in New Jersey on the anniversary or on January 11th. It's going to be a big event. So yeah, I'm very excited, very, very excited. I'm headed out of town next week. It looks like, fingers crossed, it ain't over till it's over, but it looks like I'm flying out. I got my flights and all that. And we have got a mission. We are on a mission to spread anti-imperialism. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All right, folks, we are going to do our roll call. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? I will call you all out as I see you. Names and locations. John McCarthy in Chicago. Brilliant, insightful analysis as always from John. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? All right, we got Hemp Car. Jacob in Wisconsin. Welcome, Jacob. We got Bruce in British Columbia. Alex in Brazil. Jenny in Cincinnati. Timoshenko in St. Louis. Kew Gardens Checkpoint, Charlie. We got JT24 in Mississippi. Welcome, JT. Good to have you with us. Patch in Arizona is with us tonight. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Tavis Gibbons. Kate, New Hampshire. Welcome. Good to have you with us. We got Rose. Only peace can make America great again. Amen to that. Names and locations. Patch in Arizona. Gabby in Chicago. Gabby wrote an article about why she joined CPI. And we decided to publish it as one of the things that we published in the book. And so we published Gabby's article, How We're Building a Movement That Matters, in the book that we just put out. It's on page 173 of the CPI convention booklet. And we've got, nice pictures here, right? We got Gabby having a rally in Minneapolis. We got Gabby's kind of profile picture. You can read Gabby's story, how she got involved in the organization, right? Brooklyn, Phil is in the house. He says CPI is going to be even better in 26. Damn right we will. Penny in Minneapolis. Gavin in the city by the prairie. Gavin is coming up here. We're doing an event pretty soon in New Jersey. That's going to be awesome. Melbourne, Australia. Very, very, very good. Very, very good stuff. We're doing great things here. Chris in Salt Lake City is with us. Auckland, New Zealand. Very, very good. Matthew L. in Auckland. Very, very good. Oh. Here we go. All right. Cool. StreamYard. Names and locations. Brittany from the People's Senate Northeast. All right, Brittany, good to have you with us. Brittany from the People's Senate of the Northeast. Very, very, very good. Good to have you with us. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody else? Names and locations. Anybody. Names and locations. NC, North Carolina, USA. Ethan Phillips. Ethan, good to have you with us. North Carolina is a great state with great history. Good to have you with us, Ethan. Good to have you with us. Folks, join the Center for Political Innovation. We always need more members, and we have work to do. We are not looking for paper members. Robert in New Jersey. Great. You're going to be at our event in New Jersey, I assume. All right. We're always looking for new members. We are an action-oriented organization. Penny in Minnesota. Penny has put together some great videos of her anti-imperialist work out there in Minneapolis. We just published a great article kind of summing up the National Day of Action. Richard in Woodland, Canada. We just put together a great article and video kind of summarizing the National Day of Action that we did for peace with Russia. It's on the website. We're updating the website a lot more frequently than we used to, which is a good thing. We're doing a lot more, and that is a very, very good thing that we're doing. A lot is happening. Things are happening like crazy right now. I mean, it's like boom, 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 boom. And I mean, Letitia James, not a big fan. Prosecuting her may not be the best move for Trump to engage in, but I'm not a big fan of Letitia James. Trump and Putin are talking to each other. Melania is talking with the Russian government. That's so good. Threats on Venezuela, horrible. Nobel Peace Prize completely discredits itself by giving it to a regime change activist. Oh man, so many things. It's like boom, 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 boom. And I'm supposed to be leaving town next week, supposed to be traveling. We'll see if I end up traveling next week. It looks very likely to happen, but things are still up in the air. Wild times. But people, there's nobody better than the CPI folks. We have such a good crew of people. I am talking to different members around the country, and we're engaging and learning about the history of our organization and about our approach to religious questions and about the different organizations we've worked with and we've allied with. And oh man, I take my hat off to all of you. I really, really do. I really take my hat off. Long live the Center for Political Innovation, and long live innovationism. Long live innovationism. We are an absolutely spectacular organization. We are absolutely spectacular. I will put on another CPI promotional video before I answer people's questions. I did another video. Here we go. Yep, that's us here. I'll put on the image of what we did at our amazing Great Unity Convention. We'll put that on. That's us. That's us. That's us. All right, folks. A few questions have come in. The best way to send a question is via Buy Me a Coffee. That is the best way to send the questions. It's the most convenient for me and all of that. But you can also send questions via Cash App or Rumble Rants. The best way to send a question, Buy Me a Coffee. So let's start answering coffee questions, right? Questions sent via Buy Me a Coffee get priority because that's the best way. But I'll answer, Rumble Rants. I'll answer Cash App. I saw one came over the Cash App. Good. Appreciated. It'll be answered. But Buy Me a Coffee is the best way to send your questions. So the first question, and it's great too, because you can go on as long as you want. There's no word limit. You can be anonymous. It's great. So Buy Me a Coffee, best way to send a question. Kate Johnson says, you mention in your book, Where is America Going? That the success of the after the success of the industrialization in the USSR, there was a political crisis leading to its demise. What failed and why? You likely answer this in one of your books. Why did the Soviet Union fall? The Soviet Union fell because the system became so rigid it couldn't bend, and so it broke. The Soviet Union needed to reform in the 70s and 80s. That was clear to everybody. The Stakhanovich system that they had developed, where government, it was like 90%, 91% government ownership, government-run industries. Everything was run by the state. That was a very, very effective way of building the power plants, paving the roads, building a modern university system. However, when it came to consumer goods, it had its limitations, right? And I am an advocate of market socialism, that the Stalin, Marxist-Leninist classic system is very, very good at just laying the foundations, lifting a country up, building the power grid, building, running water for a country, paving the roads, building a modern education system. But once you get over that first hurdle, right? After that, people get the basic necessities of life, they want to have fun. They want to eat in nice restaurants. They want to go see fun movies. They want to wear nice clothes. They want their kids to have toys to play with. And unfortunately, the system where everything is centrally planned by the state is not very good at delivering consumer goods. And that when you're building the country up from nothing, you can very much appeal to a spirit of selflessness, right? And that's what Stakhanovism was, that in the classic Soviet style system, the way it worked is the country is just one giant corporation. And they have a CEO, a very charismatic CEO, who's the leader of the country. Stalin, Fidel Castro, Kim Il-sung, Mao, and the country, the people in the country work as hard as they can. And the leader of the country goes around rewarding the people who work the hardest. And Stalin called it Stakhanovism, after a guy who worked really hard and dug a whole bunch of coal. And he was Stakhanovich, and he was like the hero of the Soviet Union for his, his digging of coal, his coal mining. And so, Stalin went around honoring the people who did the hardest work in the country. And that's what Stalin did. And he went around visiting factories, visiting mines, visiting schools, and just rewarding the people who worked the hardest. In Cuba, they have a similar system. It's called emulation. And that's what Fidel did his whole life. He went from farm to factory to school to university, honoring the people who worked the hardest, right? And giving them a cash bonus, right? And giving them a reward and an honor for working really, really hard. And it's kind of creating a spirit of selflessness. We're going to work really, really hard for the good of the nation. And then every year, right, Fidel Castro on May 1st would give a speech that was like 8 hours long, and the whole country would watch it because it was a national holiday. But he was talking about their job. He was talking about their living conditions. And he would talk about what was good in the economy, what needed to be improved. That's the classic Soviet style system. That system is very good at laying the foundations of a country. It's not very good, though, at consumer goods. People need to vote with their dollars on consumer goods, right? People, restaurants, hotels, children's toys, computer games, these kind of things, you need a market to facilitate those things. You really do. And after about a generation, after the foundations of the economy have been laid, at that point, you need to adjust to having market reforms. China figured that out. And they were able to make that transition in a way no communist government had ever done before. And they implemented the reform and opening up very effectively. But it was rough because no one had ever done it before. But that's because China, their Communist Party is constantly changing. I have here the official history of the Chinese Communist Party. Huge, 3 books here. And one thing that comes across when you read the official 3-volume history of the Chinese Communist Party's history, they have never been the same, right? They were not the same in the 20s as they were in the 30s. They were not the same in the 50s as they were in the 60s. They were not the same in the 70s and 80s as they are today. They're constantly evolving and adapting their system. You have to be able to change, right? Because the world is constantly changing, right? That is just the nature of reality. The world is constantly in a state of change, right? And in China, they were able to adjust their socialism in a way that no socialist country had ever done before. The Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc countries, they needed to change. They didn't know how to change. And especially the Soviet Union, they had been through hell. 27 million people had died in World War II. They had been barricaded. They had been isolated. They had been, had to rebuild. They'd had a nuclear arms race. And they developed a very rigid way of doing things where the population was depoliticized. Average people just kind of learned that if they got too involved in politics, they might get disappeared. They might get, thrown into a prison camp or something like that, because it was a very, very authoritarian system. And there was an open debate about how they should operate because of the fact that they were under attack, because they were, they'd been through so much as a country. They couldn't really have an open debate about things. And because there wasn't an open debate, there was confusion. And especially after the death of Stalin, Khrushchev came in and he got up and he took a dump all over Stalin. And he said that Stalin was an evil dictator. Stalin was all the things that, the Western media said he was. Stalin was a mass murdering tyrant. That really demoralized people. And from then on, there was a wing of the Soviet Communist Party that was going over to America and being told that America was great and had a great system. And there was a layer of American leftist intellectuals who were going over there and saying, well, you really don't need to have communism. You could just be a social democracy like Norway or Sweden. And no one could say what they really believed publicly, right? All of this was being whispered in the back room because there was no public debate. Every law they passed was unanimous. Every resolution they passed was unanimous. Whenever they gave any speech, everyone just got up and clapped, and no one knew what people really thought behind closed doors. They developed kind of a very closed, structured system where you couldn't have open public debate. And so this wing of the Communist Party that was being westernized and, thinking that the Western system was great and gradually not believing in communism, they couldn't come out and debate what they believed. So as they're all realizing the Soviet Union needed to change, everyone knew the Soviet Union needed to change, but they didn't know how it needed to change. And so as the new generation of Soviet leaders were coming in with Gorbachev, all of a sudden, these people who didn't really believe in communism were coming into power. And they were announcing, the Soviet Union can just become a welfare state. We can become like Norway or Sweden. If we dissolve the Soviet Union, America will let us just become another European liberal social democratic country. And there were a lot of people in the party bureaucracy, in the party leadership, that really believed what Bernie Sanders told them, what the liberals told them, right? That America wasn't so bad. It was just Ronald Reagan who hated them. It was just the conservatives. But there's all these Democrats in America who don't want an arms race, and that a big faction of the Soviet Communist Party's leadership were westernized. They were taken in under the leadership of the Western, countries. They were led to believe you don't need to actually have a state-run economy. They were led to believe that the USA didn't want to mess with them. And a faction of the leadership that was in power started moving the Soviet Union to dissolve. And the population was against it. And they voted against it. There was a referendum. Should we keep the Soviet Union? And the referendum, passed overwhelmingly. The people voted to keep the Soviet Union. And the vote was higher in the smaller countries. In Russia, there was a lot of people that were taken in maybe by the West. But in a lot of these countries like Kazakhstan and Latvia and Lithuania and places like that, people, they really needed the Soviet Union to be connected to a bigger economy. And they voted to keep the Soviet Union, but they dissolved it anyway. And then, there came a time where basically they could have kept the Soviet Union if the people had been willing to go out and fight for it. Your average person in the Soviet Union wanted to keep the Soviet Union. Public opinion was in favor of keeping the Soviet Union. but they weren't going to fight for it. They didn't trust the Communist Party, and the people were largely locked out of politics, to the point that when it came time where the people had to go out and fight in the streets, there were some people, some communists, that did go out and fight for them, but it wasn't enough. They needed to basically, wage a civil war to defend the Soviet Union, and the population was not politically engaged enough to do it, right? And what was an effective intelligence operation, confusing the Soviet leadership and turning a strength of the Soviet Union, which was that they were all together and they were solid against turning that into a weakness. That's jujitsu, right? Where you take your enemy's strength and you turn it into a weakness. Their strength was that they developed an ironclad discipline, an ironclad system. The USA then used their strength against them and used the fact the population, didn't quite know what was going on. They got a westernized wing of the party into power. They co-opted and cultivated layers of the Communist Party leadership, the reformist wing, the Gorbachev wing. And the population didn't quite know what to believe and didn't know who was on it. One thing led to another, and they were able to bring down the Soviet Union. And that was a disaster. And there were a number of people around the world who said the Soviet Union needed to change. They knew it needed to change, but it shouldn't dissolve, right? And yeah, the Soviet Union really needed to change, but it shouldn't have dissolved. And the fall of the Soviet Union was an absolute epic disaster of epic proportions. And that's one thing that gets glossed over, right? They make it sound, oh, communism is so bad. Well, it's funny because the fall of the Soviet Union, the dismantling of communism, was an absolute economic nightmare. Russia was economically devastated. Go and read Naomi Klein's The Shock Doctrine. Read the statistics in here about the death rate, about the depopulation. The fall of the Soviet Union was one of the greatest economic disasters in history. And it's like, oh, the free market is supposed to make everything great, right? The free market is the solution. That's not what happened, right? Free market reforms after the fall of the Soviet Union, ripping up the state-run economy and selling it off to the highest bidder was absolutely a disaster. And out of that disaster, Putin came into power, stabilizing the economy by putting it once again under state control, centralizing the economy around state-run oil and state-run natural gas. And Russia's economy is largely state-run at this point, right? It's centered around Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-run energy companies that bring in a huge amount of revenue. But that revenue is then used to subsidize the titanium industry, the farming boom that they're having in the Far East and other parts of the country. I mean, Russia's economy is largely centered around the state, but they do a lot to cultivate small business owners, right? And this is an interesting argument because a lot of libertarians really like Russia. And on the one hand, right, they're confused because Russia's economy is run by the state, right? The state subsidies, the state, handing out, energy revenue and building farms. But what the state does is it cultivates small business owners. It cultivates a middle class, right? And that they have a flat tax in Russia of 10%, right? Just 10%. In America, your taxes are like 35%. Your taxes are insane in America. In Russia, it's about 10%, right? Food is subsidized. It's very cheap. Gasoline, if you need to fill up your car in Russia, it's very cheap because they got a lot of gasoline there. And the government actively goes out and helps people start their own farm, helps people start their own business and gets a subsidy. So you have a market, but that market is centered around a state. It's actually very interesting, right? The Russian economic system. And it's very much modeled on what China has done. It's very much modeled on Deng Xiaoping theory, but it's also very much influenced by Singapore. Russia has recovered from the fall of the Soviet Union very effectively. And this idea that if you just privatize everything, right, that should have, the fall of the Soviet Union should have been economically great, and it wasn't. And they've reasserted state control, but their state control, their government plan, they have a government that delivers growth, right? They have a government that controls the economy largely, but it goes out of its way to find creative people. And I've been to these events where I go to the youth programs where they find high achieving young people and they say, don't run off to America and be a doctor in America. Don't run off and be a physics professor in Canada. Stay here and we'll help you start a business. We'll give you government funding to start a business, to start an enterprise, to start a corporation, and that Russia invests in its people. That's what the BRICS economies are like. That's what makes them different from the West. We don't invest in our people. We're Malthusians. In the West, we think human beings are a cancer on the planet. Human beings are a problem. But in the BRICS countries, they view human beings as a great asset, a great vehicle for creating wealth. And that's what they do in Russia. That's what they do in China. That's what they do in these countries. Maybe they don't do it as well as they should. And maybe there's problems. I mean, these countries all have problems, but they invest in their people. And they have governments that come out of anti-colonial revolutions and take control of the economy. But then they say, all right, we have state control, but we're going to find creative people. We're going to find skilled people. We're going to find the best and brightest among our young people. And we're going to unleash them. We're going to invest in them, and we're going to help them to be creative. So they've actually found like the perfect synthesis between capitalism and communism, right? On the one hand, it's not the market running rampant. It's not, you're on your own, pull yourself up by your bootstraps on the one hand. But on the other hand, it's not everyone works in a government bureaucracy and just does what. No, they're encouraging creativity and innovation. It's brilliant. Deng Xiaoping theory, 21st century socialism, right? Whatever you want to call it. We call it the innovationist system. Innovationism is the future, right? And, we're in a new stage right now. And there are people, for a long time, I was doing the communism thing, but it took me traveling and learning and being in communist groups and visiting anti-imperialist countries to learn we're not doing the communism thing. We've entered a new stage, right? And that innovationism, anti-monopoly governments, anti-imperialist governments, right, that invest in their population, pro-growth, pro-humanity governments, that is the future. Governments of action that invest in working families, that is the future. And that is the new system that has emerged. And in Venezuela and in Nicaragua, they call it 21st century socialism. In Iran, they call it not capitalism, but Islam, neither East nor West. And, in China, they call it socialism with Chinese characteristics. In America, it's going to be called innovationism. And it's going to be a government of action that fights for working families. And we are the organization that understands this, because I have sat down with President Rayazi. I have talked to Russian President Putin. You can watch the video of me and him talking. I have talked with the son of the president of Nicaragua, and we talked about economics. We had a long chat about economics. I get this stuff, right? We're innovating. We're building a new organization dedicated to promoting a pro-humanity, pro-growth, anti-monopoly government, an anti-monopoly coalition right here in America. And I'm very excited about it. That's a long way from what you asked, Kate, but I hope I gave you a good answer there. But, I've given a lot of talks on these topics over the years, and I encourage you to check out, our content and stuff. But I hope that gave you an answer about why the Soviet Union fell. That's a very important question. Thank you for asking that good question and buying me a coffee to ask it. Now, Tavis Gibbons says, what was the Spanish anarchist movement? Well, that's a very big question. Anarchism in Spain is something that's been around. I mean, there's still anarchists in Spain right up to today. But generally, when people refer to the Spanish anarchist movement, they're referring to prior to the Second World War, Spain had the Spanish Civil War, and that, you had the rise of the Spanish Republic, and then you had the Spanish Civil War, and then eventually you had Franco's dictatorship that was in power until 1978, I believe, was when it fell. Maybe it was earlier than that or later. But you had Franco's dictatorship after that. Before Franco's dictatorship, Spain was very much a hotbed of leftism. So what you had is Spain, Spain is an interesting case study. Spain was one of the first colonizers, right? Spain colonized the Caribbean, colonized South America. And the wealth was coming into Spain from colonialism. And you had the merchant class emerging in Spain. And you had the Reformation taking place across Europe. And so Spain was a monarchy. It was a feudal society. But, Queen Isabella was sending Christopher Columbus and sending the conquistadors and all of that. And Spain took a U-turn, a very dramatic U-turn in like the 1400s, the Inquisition. And Spain stopped moving toward capitalism. The Spanish aristocracy and feudalism and the Spanish Catholic Church, they said, stop, halt. They put on the brakes. And you had the Spanish Inquisition, where a lot of people were burned at the stake, and they arrested a lot of the money lenders. Actually, Jews were heavily persecuted during the Spanish Inquisition because Jews lended money, right? And, in order to have capitalism, in feudalism, there is money. but most people aren't allowed to touch it, right? It used to be called filthy lucre, right? It was a sin to touch money if you were a Catholic in the feudal system. So Jews were this special group of people who handled money, right? And the Spanish Inquisition, they saw that Spain you started to have the rise of a merchant class, and you had conquistadors and all of that. And so in Spain, the feudal system saw a threat, and you had the Reformation going on, the Protestant Reformation happening in Germany and other places. And so in Spain, the feudal system went into all-out mode to defend itself. They burned a bunch of people at the stake. They started persecuting the Jews and killing the Jews during the Inquisition. And all of a sudden, Spain was not going to move toward capitalism. And that's why Spain was a big deal at the beginning of colonialism. And then it stopped. It didn't become a fully capitalist society. They put the brakes on it, and they maintained feudalism. Whereas Germany and Britain and France and America, you had capitalism rising in the Western world, but not in Spain. Spain held on to feudalism for a really long time, right? And that's why Spain was underdeveloped, right? It was much poorer in comparison to Britain and France and other countries. They didn't have a full-on change in property relations. They maintained peasants and serfs. They maintained feudalism. They maintained the monarchy. And that was Spain, they were underdeveloped, but Spain has a lot of mines in it. There's a lot of minerals and mining, and it was a big countryside, a lot of people. And in the 20th century, Spain had a revolution against feudalism, finally, right? And the peasants of Spain rose up, and the workers in the mines went on strike, and all over Spain, there was an uprising. The monarchy was brought down, and you had the Spanish Republic that came into existence. What year was the Spanish Republic created? All right, Spanish Republic, right? It was created in 1931. Finally, the Spanish monarchy was toppled. Feudalism was toppled. You had the Spanish Republic. And the struggle to overthrow feudalism in Spain was largely peasant uprisings, and this was actually the difference, right? So in Russia, right, you had a very big peasant movement, the Narodniks, they were called. And the Marxists, they organized the factory workers, the industrial workers, but the anarchists were the peasant movements. And actually, interestingly, if you go back, before World War II, back to the 1800s, back to the early 1900s, the first half of the 20th century, that was the difference between communists and anarchists. Communists, Marxists wanted to organize industrial workers to fight against their employers. And anarchists tend to organize peasants against oppression, right? Anarchism is a movement that opposes the state, right? That it's focused on not the economic question, but the question of social hierarchy, right? The peasant wants freedom from the noble, right? The peasant is told, you are the private property. You're a semi-slave. You're the private property of a noble. You have no rights. You have to work the land, and peasants are fighting for freedom. They want their own land. They want their own little tract of land. They want to own their own land and not be serfs anymore. And they want freedom from hierarchy. And peasant movements are focused on opposing authority rather than opposing, just simply fighting for the right of the worker on the job. They're fighting they want to have their own land and freedom, right? Land and they want their own land, and they want to fight against the very repressive feudal apparatus that holds them in semi-slavery. So peasants were, the peasant movements tended to be anarchist in their orientation. And there's a whole history of that. Bakunin, right, who was one of Marx's rivals, he organized uprisings in Spain among the peasantry. And in Russia, you had the Narodniks, and you had Peter Kropotkin, who was an organizer of the peasantry. He wrote The Conquest of Bread, and he was associated with peasant uprisings. And that anarchism was something peasants were attracted to. Now, among the people of Spain who rose up and overthrew the Spanish Republic, you generally had three currents, right? And this is the revolutionary movement, revolutionary politics in Europe at that time. Anti-capitalist politics generally had three strands. You had social democracy, which was the belief that socialism, a society without class oppression, grew naturally out of democracy. And once you establish democracy and elected government, it'll gradually, naturally lead to socialism, right? That the working class will outvote the capitalists, that it'll be one step at a time. That's called social democracy. That's, that's the Second International. That's the British Labour Party. That's the French Socialist Party, the German Social Democratic Party. It's like out of the struggle for democracy, as a fulfillment of capitalist democracy, you get socialism, right? That's social democracy. And there were a lot of people that overthrew the Spanish Republic that believed once we have an elected government, we'll gradually create a classless society because we'll have the right to vote, universal male suffrage. They weren't even thinking about giving women the right to vote, universal male suffrage, right? That's social democracy. Then you have communism or Marxism, Leninism, which says it's a struggle to seize control of the state. The revolutionary working class must take control of the state. It's not enough to just have a democracy, right? That you want a revolutionary working class. The working class must establish the dictatorship of the proletariat, must seize control of the state. And then you have another current, which is anarchism, right? Which says we're not interested in political power at all, right? We're not trying to seize political power. We're not trying to, gradually reform political power. We're just going to do our own thing. That's anarchism. And for peasants, that meant we're just going to we're going to overthrow our landlords, overthrow the rural aristocracy, overthrow the landlord. We're going to set up a little commune and we're just going to do it ourselves. We don't need the government to give us the land. We don't need, we're just going to do it ourselves, right? The rural communes. And that was a big thing in Russia. The Narodniks, they were called. And Peter Kropotkin in his book, The Conquest of Bread, right? Peter Kropotkin was this Russian anarchist, and he went around buying up land, and the idea was the peasants would voluntarily work on this land, and it would be like a model kind of egalitarian rural commune of the peasantry, right? And among factory workers, the anarchist movement says we're not trying to elect socialists to the government. We're not trying to build a movement to eventually seize power. We're just going to build our own union to fight against our employer, and our union will eventually seize control of the factory, and we're not interested in politics at all. It's purely an economic struggle. Right? That is the anarchist movement. So in Spain, as you overthrew the Spanish monarchy and you had the Republic, you had Social Democrats, you had the Communist Party, which was inspired by the Soviet Union, which was a very big party, and you had the anarchists, and the anarchists were very popular among the peasantry. Now, after the overthrow of the monarchy, the Republic comes into existence, and the Communist Party and the Socialist Party have a lot of seats in the government, and the anarchists have a lot of peasants who support them, and there's labor unions that are aligned with the communists, labor unions that are aligned with Social Democrats, labor unions that are aligned with the anarchists. I think the anarchist, the anarchist labor union was called this. What is it? The CNT? Yeah, the Confederation National Trabajo, the workers. The union, the National Workers Union, the CTN, or the CNT, was the labor union affiliated with the anarchists. They didn't vote. They didn't participate in elections. They just, the peasants were organizing for their own land, the workers in the factories, etc. The Communist Party had seats in the parliament, etc. So what happened? The Spanish Republic was this very radical coalition that included some people that didn't want any kind of socialism, a lot of capitalists who just believed in having an elected government, and the socialists and the communists and the anarchists. They're all part of this Spanish Republic. Well, what happens? Well, there's a general named Franco, General Francisco Franco, who's in North Africa. Spain has colonies in North Africa. And he's in North Africa and Tunisia and places like that. And he's a colonizer, right? He's colonizing people for Spain. And he says, oh no, we're going to bring the monarchy back, right? The monarchy is the sacredness of Spain. And he loves the Catholic Church. And he feels a lot of these communists and anarchists or whatever are against the Catholic Church because they view the Catholic Church as oppressing people. And he says, I'm going to protect the Catholic Church, and I'm going to bring back the king and the monarchy. And so he brings his army from North Africa into Spain, and he's going to overthrow the Spanish Republic and create a fascist dictatorship called his political movement's called Falangismo, or the Phalangists, right? The Phalange, right? And they're going to build this fascist movement, right? That is going to bring the king back and crush the Spanish Republic. Now, the question is, so what do you do about it? Well, the Communist Party says we must build an anti-fascist coalition. And the Soviet Union supported the Spanish Republic and sent them all kinds of guns and weapons. Mexico supported the Spanish Republic. But largely the Western countries didn't support the Spanish Republic. And there were differences within the Spanish Republic. How do we go about fighting the fascists. And the communists, their position was, we need to support the Spanish Republic, and we need to get guns from the Soviet Union, and we need to build a united front, and we need to bring in international volunteers. Thousands of people from all over the world went to Spain to fight to defend the Republic. And that was their position. The anarchists, the CNT, and the Trotskyists, the POUM, the POUM, they said that in order to really defeat fascism, we have to overthrow capitalism entirely. And that we don't want to unite with the capitalists that are against the fascists. In fact, we want to overthrow them. And the anarchists in particular said that we need to fight against the Catholic Church, right? So the Catholic Church was very divided. There were some Catholics that said, you know what, the Spanish Republic is full of communists. It's bad. We support fascism. There were some Catholics that said, you know what, maybe we don't agree with some people, but we don't want to have a fascist dictatorship. The Catholic Church was very divided. The anarchists of Spain viewed the Catholic Church as the enemy. So what the anarchists of Spain were doing is they were going around in the countryside. They were seizing parts of the countryside to establish kind of model worker farmer communities, right? And they were waging peasant uprisings in the countryside. Whereas the communists were saying, don't do that. Let's all just come together to defend the Republic from Franco. So there was a big difference between the anarchists and the communists in Spain, because some of the communists are saying, let's just hold this all together. We'll align with liberal and anti-fascist Catholics. We'll make an alliance with capitalists that are anti-fascist. We're building an anti-fascist united front. The anarchists are saying, no, we're going to overthrow capitalism and we're going to set up model anarchist communities in the countryside. And that was the division. Now, the problem was the anarchist peasant uprisings were very anti-Catholic because the Catholic Church was seen as propping up feudalism. The Catholic Church told people to obey their landowners, that, you know, the noble is given divine right to rule over you by God. And so when the anarchists would seize control of an area, they would brutally retaliate against the Catholic Church. And is it possible some of this is exaggerated? Of course, right? The fascists made horrendous propaganda everywhere, but it happened at least a few places. They would very brutally murder priests and nuns, and they would crucify them. They would rape nuns, right? And they would crucify priests, like Jesus is crucified. They would nail they was very brutal retaliation. And you see this all over the world. Whenever peasants rise up, they're mad. Peasants are mad, angry motherfuckers. All right. You know, the French Revolution, right? All the guillotine and the chopping off the heads, that was peasants in France. When peasants get mad, peasants have a lot of anger, right? Peasants have no rights. They're not allowed to look the landowner in the face. They have different words they can use. They're raised from the time they're children to believe somebody else has the divine right to rule over them. And when peasants finally rebel, it's ugly. Right? And they take revenge like you wouldn't believe. And Pol Pot in Cambodia, he led a peasant uprising where they murdered all the educated people for having glasses. Well, they have privilege. We're going to kill them. Right? The French Revolution, the Reign of Terror. When peasants rise up, it's nasty because peasants are very, very, very oppressed. And their targets tend to be the church, the nobility, the state, the government, right? They're not waging an economic struggle. They're waging a struggle against authority, right? And so the peasants in Spain, when they would take over an area, there'd be priests and nuns there, and they viewed the Catholic Church as the institution that held up their oppression. So they cut people's heads off and nailed people to crosses and raped people. And they were pretty nasty motherfuckers, all right? They did some pretty nasty, horrendous atrocities against the Catholic Church. And of course, the fascists, Hitler and Mussolini and Franco, made propaganda about that, and they blasted it all over the world. Well, this is what's happening in Spain, and that's why it really kind of contributed to the fact that America and France and all of them didn't support the Spanish Republic. The Soviet Union and Mexico were the only two countries in the world that supported the Spanish Republic. And so the communists were trying to stop the anarchists. And there was the Battle of Catalonia, where the Trotskyites of POUM and the anarchists of the CNT fought against the Spanish Republic, led by communists. And there was a lot of anarchists who got executed, and there was a lot of Trotskyites who got executed because they were the communists were trying to hold the republic together. The anarchists were trying to build model communities in the countryside and trying to take revenge against the Catholic Church. It's now been revealed that the anarchists of Spain and the Trotskyites of Spain were being supported by Hitler. They were what they call the fifth column, right? That when Franco invaded Barcelona, he said, I have 4 columns outside the city, but inside the city, I have the 5th column. And that's the people that are trying to confuse the country from within, trying to sow unrest. The Trotskyites and the anarchists were being covertly supported by the fascists because it would undermine the republic. It would sow division within the republic. George Orwell, he was the guy who wrote 1984. He went to Spain and he fought with the Trotskyites, and he was part of the uprising against the Spanish Republic. He even wrote a book about it, The Battle of Catalonia, or The Homage to Catalonia. Well, it's no secret. George Orwell, not only was he a virulent anti-communist, he wrote Animal Farm in 1984. George Orwell was also a British intelligence officer, and he worked for the Ministry of Information, the British government propaganda services during World War II. I mean, George Orwell was this famous British writer who was kind of a leftist. He wrote about poverty, down and out in Paris and London. And, he was this well-known British intellectual writer who was kind of a leftist, but he was an anti-communist. And he worked with the Trotskyites. And then he became an official government propagandist for the British government. And then after World War II, he wrote 2 anti-communist screeds that we all have to read in school, 1984 and Animal Farm, which gets spoon-fed to school children in America. And he was, he was probably working with the British intelligence services at the time he was in Spain. I mean, that can't be proven necessarily, but he was an anti-communist. He was with the Trotskyites who waged this uprising against the Spanish Republic. And, anarchists in Spain, they get romanticized. They really do get romanticized. And they did good things. They were fighting for the peasants, etc. But they also did some pretty bad things. And that their behavior very significantly contributed to the rise of Franco, right? And that the communists were doing everything they could to unify Spain against Franco, and the anarchists were doing everything they could to create violence. And actually, if you talk to anti-communists, a lot of them think it was the communists that were raping the nuns and all of that, right? People that are not on the left don't understand these differences, right? And, this is one thing, right, that, to normies, all communists look the same, right? They're all the same, right? They don't know the difference between Trotskyites, anarchists, the Communist Party, and standard, right-wing Catholic propaganda is communists were raping nuns, and that's why you had to have Franco's dictatorship, because the communists in Spain were so bad, right? People don't understand the nuances of the Communist Party was trying to stop the anarchists, and people don't understand any of this nuance, right? And I mean, when I go to conferences around the world with, conservatives and, anti-Israel conservatives, and they always say, oh, yes, well, it was the communists were so bad. That's why Franco had to do this. Well, it wasn't the communists. It was the anarchists. It was the Trotskyites, but they don't understand that there's a difference because it's just the left, right? The Spanish Republic was this big communist mess, and it wasn't communist. There was a lot of capitalists in the Spanish Republic, and they don't understand. It was just the Spanish Republic was full of all these evil communists that hated the church and hated the Catholics, and that's the narrative that they have. And look, I will say this, right? One thing about the left, which is part of why I'm neither left nor right. I'm an innovationist. Part of the problem with the left, one way to make sure that the left loves you is lose, right? If you want to be loved by the left, lose, right? Because if you lose, you never take power. There's no problem defending you, right? There's a million books about Eugene Debs because he never took power. There's a million books about the IWW. They never took power. They weren't connected to any state. Fine. There's all kinds of people. You go to the left forum, there's all kinds of academics writing about Rosa Luxemburg. She lost, right? There's all kinds of people writing about various anarchist leaders in Spain because they lost. They never set up a government. But once you set up a government, like the Venezuelans have, like the Nicaraguans have, like Stalin did, like China, all of a sudden you're in power. And so you're going to be accused of violating human rights, and you're going to be called a dictatorship. And suddenly defending you means you have to have some courage, and you have to say that the New York Times is full of lies and all of that. But a lot of these leftists are so crazy that in their mind, right, there's a million of these, right? Whether it's Rosa Luxemburg, whether it's, whether it's the anarchists of Spain, whether it's Trotsky, if only my guy had been in power, it would have been good socialism. But if only Rosa Luxemburg had taken power in Germany, it would have been real socialism that wasn't authoritarian and wasn't repressive, wasn't violating human. If only the anarchists of Spain, if only Che Guevara had taken power instead of Fidel Castro. I've heard that one too, which is pretty crazy, right? If only if only this person who lost took power, then it would be okay. But unfortunately, it was evil Stalin and evil Mao and evil Kim Il-sung and evil Fidel. They took power and they violated human rights. And that's why communism doesn't work. And that's why everything we've been told about communist governments is true. It's because these people. But if only this loser, I hate to put it that way, I don't want to call them losers. These are great people usually who made great sacrifices. But if only this empty vessel I've found somewhere, if only they had taken power, it would have been good. And that is a classic example of leftist, it's that not real socialism thing, right? It's like it's the right-wing caricature. If you lay out standard anti-communist lies and they say, well, that just wasn't real socialism, and it's like the most extreme example of that. The anarchists in Spain, Rosa Luxemburg, Trotsky, Che Guevara, and some of these people were very good people. I admire Rosa Luxemburg. I quote her work, but she lost. She died. She didn't take power. So people can project onto her. If only she had taken power, it would have been this way. And there's no risk in supporting her. If Rosa Luxemburg had won in Germany and actually taken power and become the leader of Germany, there would have been people trying to overthrow her, and she would have had to repress them. And some of them would have gotten away and fled to Britain or America, and they would have said, Rosa Luxemburg is an evil dictator who's oppressing people and and we would all be taught in school that Rosa Luxemburg was a mass murdering, bloodthirsty Stalinist, and none of these idiots would support her. But she lost, and so because she lost, it's okay to support her, right? When you let your enemy tell you who you're allowed to support and who you're not, this is why I don't want to be a leftist anymore. Right. And I'm just telling you, anarchists in Spain, a lot of them were very heroic. A lot of them made great sacrifices and they fought for the peasantry and they did a lot of great things. A lot of them also did things that really hurt the Spanish Republic. They committed horrendous atrocities against the Catholic Church. They did awful things that contributed to the Spanish Republic losing. But the point is they lost. They were in power for what? A year, a month. They had set up the commune here. They set up the model city there, but they lost. And because they lost, of course they would be real socialism, and that's the problem with the left. And this is why the left, it's like the so-called anti-Stalinist left. During the Cold War, the US government started funding the anti-Stalinist left. This is openly admitted. The anti-Stalinist left it's beyond just that they're scared to support anybody who actually won. It's so far beyond that. You read Fascinating Fascism by Susan Sontag. You read what the Congress for Cultural Freedom. You read the stuff in Partisan Review magazine that printed George Orwell and printed Hannah Arendt. It's not just that they can't bring themselves to support the Stalinists who won. It's that they don't want to. They're against winners. Like they think strength is fascist. Okay. They have a mindset that is based on, I want to be the other. I want to be the persecuted victim. I want to see myself as the great individual oppressed by the mob. And it fits neoconservatism like a glove, right? And they identify with anything that is weak, and anything that is strong or is winning, they're triggered by, right? And it fits neoconservatism and the neoconservative anti-populist view of Leo Strauss put forward in his philosophical writing, Persecution and the Art of Writing by Leo Strauss. It fits it like a glove, right? And that the anti-Stalinist left, they can't attach themselves to anything real because then they would be the oppressors. They're not putting forward a political position. They are the permanent opposition. They are against the masses of people. They have taken on an identity of being the permanent other, the permanent opposition, of being in fear and in opposition to the masses of people. And it's a hard thing to understand. It's taken me years. I mean, I spent my entire adult life in communist groups. I'm 38 years old, and I've seen how dysfunctional they are. And I've been to actual anti-imperialist countries, and I have dedicated my life to being an anti-imperialist. And I'm telling you, it's taken me years to understand that leftism has degenerated into a mindset that can only support losers. They can only support people who lost. They can only support people they perceive as weak. The woke, they love minorities because they see minorities as weak. And the second that a minority starts to show strength, they don't like them anymore. Right? They'll tell you how much they love black people. Black people are so oppressed and they're poor victims. Go read To Kill a Mockingbird, right? In To Kill a Mockingbird, this book written by a white woman, the hero is a rich white lawyer with a heart of gold. And the black people are just these poor, oppressed victims who could never fight for their own rights. But these same liberals, if they ever see Minister Farrakhan, ooh, they hate him. And Chairman O'Malley of the Uhuru movement, ooh, they hate him. They like people and things they perceive as weak. And the second that someone from an oppressed group stops being perceived as weak, they don't like them anymore. Right? I mean, they hate black nationalism. They hate Minister Farrakhan. They hate the Uhuru movement. I have never seen it. You'd think, well, I mean, how is it that these woke people, their entire worldview is based on we are against the American system and we stand with black people. So the American government goes after a black socialist group, raids their home, drags an 83-year-old man into federal court and charges him with being a Russian agent. So you'd think every woke person in the world, every single one of these woke people would have been there at the Tampa federal courthouse to say this is wrong and they stand against it. Well, if you think that, you're wrong. Tucker Carlson supported them. I supported them, and we had UN press conferences. I raised their case at the UN multiple times. I raised their case in Russia. But they didn't get any support. All these woke people hate the Uhuru movement. I heard on the internet that it's a call. I heard that it's a call on the internet. I heard they didn't support the Democrats. And these woke people, how are these woke people intellectually consistent? Why couldn't they support the Uhuru movement? Because they're a strong movement. They project strength. Chairman O'Malley is 80 years old, and he's the most well-built, muscular guy I've ever seen. They build farmers markets. They build solid organizations in the black community. They empower people. They're not weak. They're not perceived as weak. Woke people, it's like, they would support Chairman O'Malley if he had gone to prison, right? If they'd lost the case and they'd been dragged into prison, then they would support them because they'd perceive them as weak. It's this weird leftism has become this mindset where you can only support the anarchists of Spain. You can only support Rosa Luxemburg. You can only support Trotsky because they lost. You can't support anyone who actually wins. It is a crazy mindset, right? The second that somebody wins, the New York Times is going to say that they committed human rights violations. They're going to have military parades like I just showed you from North Korea, and they're going to look strong and, oh my God, then they're the oppressor. Leftism has become a mindset, a damaged mindset where you can't support anyone who actually won. And I hope I'm not offending you, Tavis. I'm just telling you how it is. I'm just being real with you. And so you ask about the anarchists of Spain. I gave you the history and I gave you my understanding that the reason that they are a fetish among American leftists is because they lost. It's because they lost, and because of, our movement, leftism as a movement in the West is mind fucked. I don't know how to put it in any other way. And that's a very, very long answer. I should probably clip this. It's a very long answer to your question. But that's what the anarchists of Spain are, and that's why they are a fetish in leftist circles in the West. Now, Bandsaw Bandit says, the breakdown of diplomatic relations that the U.S. seems to have propelled over recent years has created a vacuum in international relations. And as such, countries will fall back on their ideologies and decision-making, and this is quickly leading us to clashes that are magnifying, in my opinion. Okay, I don't know what that means. That's interesting. I mean, okay. Question. Strong ties are being formed because of this, such as the leaving the U.S. in a weak position, both economically and militarily. Well, that's not the case. The USA is not weak. Can the U.S. repair diplomatic ties and restore some stability? Okay, so that reminds me, I don't quite understand what you're getting at there. bandsaw bandit, but it reminds me of after Trump won the first time, they said America is retreating from the world. America is giving up its obligation to spread democracy. And when Joe Biden announced his presidential campaign for 2020, he wrote an article for Foreign Affairs magazine, America must lead again. And that is the allegation against Trump that is made by liberals, is that, America should be leading the world and spreading democracy and pushing against Russia and all that. And Trump wants America to just retreat into itself, right? He's an isolationist. Trump is not an isolationist. What he's doing on the coast of Venezuela, that's not isolation. Giving billions of dollars to Israel, bombing Iran, that's not isolationism. Trump is not an isolationist. The liberal opposition to Trump, though, is that some of his rhetoric says we shouldn't be sending weapons to Ukraine. He's doing that, right? Some of the rhetoric of Trump is he doesn't seem to be as interested in courting the various European countries as allies of the United States, and he talks against regime change wars. He talks about America first, and that they want Trump to be a team player defending globalism, imperialism. And they're threatened by the fact that Trump, to some extent or other in his rhetoric, he seems to put forward the notion that America doesn't need to be involved all over the world, etc. And Trump isn't doing that, but his rhetoric matches how most Americans feel. Most Americans do not want their country involved in all these wars. They don't. So, I don't know what to say. You worded it very strangely, but I feel like that's what you were getting at. You were pushing the idea that there's a void because Trump is pulling out. America has retreated under Trump, and I don't think America has really retreated. Trump has largely in international stuff remained hawkish and interventionist, and this just kind of sounds like the rhetoric that we heard from the Council on Foreign Relations and etc. It's part of their Trump derangement syndrome, is that Trump might not have the USA be involved in all these conflicts, so I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. Now, John sent a cough. He said Laura Loomer is throwing a temper tantrum, accusing Trump of selling out to Qatar. That's the best endorsement of the police plan I've seen yet, right? So Qatar, Laura Loomer is being very interesting right now. Laura Loomer is this awful, awful, awful Trump supporting Zionist. She's a huge Zionist, a really anti-Islamic bigot. She's talking very strangely about Venezuela, right? She does not support Trump attacking Venezuela, which is very odd. And she's furious about the peace deal with Hamas because it involves Qatar being allowed to set up a military base on U.S. territory, right? Qatar will be allowed to set up some of its forces, and Qatar is a Muslim country that's anti-Israel, that, funds the Muslim Brotherhood, funds Al Jazeera. The Qatari monarchy is allowed to have some kind of military force on U.S. soil. She hates Muslims so much. But then she's also saying that she doesn't like all the threats on Venezuela. She said that Venezuela has been a back channel helping negotiate the deal with Hamas. And she is saying like that Trump's threats on Venezuela are betrayal. She's very strange, I will say. And I mean, seeing her tweets has actually been but I feel like she knows a lot, right? As much as she's a nut, as she's a really hateful anti-Islamic bigot and just a really over-the-top supporter of Israel. She also is very close to the White House. There are even a lot of rumors that she and Trump had some kind of romantic fling or whatever, and that she she talks to Trump. She has direct access to him. So what she says is very interesting and very important. And the fact that she's mad about this deal, it probably indicates that to some degree or other, Israel has actually had to make some serious concessions. And also her remarks about Venezuela make me hopeful that maybe the USA won't attack. I don't know what could happen. I think there's three possibilities here. One, this is all just for show, just like in Trump's first term. And this is just, they're going to make a lot of noise and Trump will make people happy that he threatened Venezuela and then he'll back away from it. Two, there will be some kind of bombing of Venezuela. There'll be a military strike on Venezuela, which would be absolutely awful, but it's possible. This point, I didn't think that was the case. My money was on it not happening. I'm still thinking it's not going to happen. Honestly, I think they probably won't actually strike Venezuela, but it's possible. At this point, I mean, it's looking like it's possible. I don't know. The third thing is the USA would actually invade Venezuela. Now, I think the most likely thing is nothing's going to happen. That is my prediction, right? If I had a crystal ball, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what's going to happen. I think the most likely thing is that Trump will saber rattle, and then this will just kind of gradually, the news cycle will move on, right? The Trump will put on his show and make his threats, and then we'll all move on. But that said, there could be a strike on Venezuela. And they could attack various sites and say, all right, I got the drug dealing site, or, that might happen. Kind of like what Trump did with Yemen. The third option would be an actual invasion to try and actually overthrow the Venezuelan government. That would be an absolute nightmare. And there would be Americans coming home in dead bodies. And that would be the worst case scenario. And it would lead to instability and chaos spreading throughout South America. It would be disastrous. And many South American governments have said they would support Venezuela. And if the Venezuelan government were to actually fall, you think there's a problem with drug gangs now, the instability that would result from removing Maduro from power, you'd have to completely wreck Venezuela, right? This oil-rich country with a strong central government would be completely wrecked. And there would be a huge vacuum of instability, and you would have all kinds of drug gangs and cartels and instability and chaos. That would be a nightmare for that entire region. That'd be a nightmare for all of South America. And, in order to make it happen, a lot of Americans would have to die. I mean, a lot of American soldiers would get killed in the process of bringing down the Venezuelan government. They will fight. So I really hope that third option doesn't happen. I really hope that second option doesn't happen. That would be stupid. It would be awful. It would be horrible. And I think what's most likely to happen, my prediction is that the news cycle will move on. And, but I don't know. I mean, anything's possible. And I mean, we need to raise our voices in loud opposition to any attack on Venezuela, any attack whatsoever. And yeah, Laura Loomer, she says interesting things. And, she seems to know more than other people. She seems to kind of represent the ultra-Zionist wing of the Trump administration. The fact that she's talking the way she's talking about Venezuela makes me almost think that maybe they won't move against Venezuela. But at the end of the day, I really do not know. I don't know what's going to happen. It's a very dangerous situation. Now, Richard says, for the U.S. sees China as a greater threat than Russia. I mean, what do you mean by threat? What do you mean by threat? I don't think either country is really a threat to us Americans. But in terms of, pushing back against the power of the big monopolies, China has a much bigger economy than Russia does. Russia sells oil and gas. They're an energy giant, but China is an industrial giant. China makes half the steel in the world. China has the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. So if you're talking about a bigger competitor on the markets, yeah, China's a bigger competitor. Russia is a competitor with oil, and oil is very essential, right? That's why Venezuela, Libya, Iraq, that's why they're all targets. So Russia's pretty important, but I guess China represents a much bigger chunk of the global economy in that sense. I know Trump is really, really angry about the mineral thing, right? And that, China, also those rare earth minerals, that's computers, right? Those rare earth minerals that China, they've very strategically secured like 93% of the world market of those rare earth minerals. So, the USA puts all these tariffs on China. China says, okay, well, there go your minerals, United States. What are you going to do about it? Well, that's their right? I mean, if you push on people, people push back, right? It's the game that the imperialists play is like, it's like they're allowed to do anything. What China is doing with rare earth minerals, let's keep in mind, that's something that the United States has been doing for decades. For decades, they control, and put export controls on different things. So China says, look, these are very vital minerals, magnets that we control. We're going to put restrictions on them. Oh my God, this is a declaration of war. Well, how do you think the other countries felt when America did that with the stuff that we export? And so, yeah, China's pushing back, right? China's pushing back. So, we'll see how this develops. But yeah, China, there's a bigger chunk of the world economy. China's an industrial power. Russia is an energy power. And that is a push and pull. It seems like the Trump camp, yes, they're more focused on opposing China than opposing Russia, at least in rhetoric. But Trump has not ended the war in Ukraine. And as of now, there's not a proxy war with China anywhere. So, in the Taiwan thing, they make noise here and there, but it hasn't started up, right? I really, seemed to be the strategy of the Biden administration for a while, was that they wanted to try and provoke China to reunify the mainland with Taiwan militarily. And it looks like that has de-escalated. We'll see what happens. But as of now, the Taiwan thing has not, escalated. And I think most people realize that, okay, it's like, look at Ukraine now. Is that what we want to be? Right? I mean, is that a good future for Taiwan? No, not is it right? Not do you hate the mainland? Not are you? No. What would be the result of the Taiwan mainland going to war with Taiwan Island going to war with the Chinese mainland? What would be the result of that? Would that be good for the people on Taiwan? I don't think so. You can hate China all day long, right? And that, you don't get anywhere with these people that are like Taiwan separatists. Taiwan is not China. You're not going to get anywhere with that, right? That's, we don't live there. We don't speak the language. We're not part of that culture. But if you encounter one of these people, my advice to you is don't argue with them about whether or not Taiwan is China and all of that, because you're not going to make any progress. My advice is say, look at Ukraine right now. Do you want that to be Taiwan? No. I get it. Yeah, you hate China. You're not China. Okay, yeah, I get it. But what would be the result of Taiwan going to war with the mainland China? What would be the result? Is that going to be good for your people? Yeah, but it's China's fault. It's China's fault. Oh, okay. Okay, whatever. I mean, do you win? Is there any benefit to Taiwan going to war with? It's been revealed. I don't know if you saw this, but let's remind people that the USA actually has plans. So there are computer chip factories on Taiwan. The USA doesn't want China to get its hands on. So the USA actually has plans that if China were to, retake the island of Taiwan, that the USA would then bomb Taiwan and bomb the factories to make sure China didn't get them. Now, is that what a friend does? Imagine that you had a friend and your friend was always trying to get you into fistfights with people that were 10 times bigger than you. And then you found out that your friend even had a plan that once he got you into a fistfight with somebody who's 10 times bigger than you, he was then going to go over to your house and break all your stuff while you were in the fight. Is that a friend? Well, that's what America wants to do to Taiwan. They want to provoke Taiwan into a fight with the Chinese mainland. And while they're in the fight, the U.S. government has a plan to bomb Taiwan to make sure China doesn't get any of the computer chips. Now, how in the world can anyone with that, think that America is trying to help the people on the island of Taiwan? Right? Is that, again, I get it. All right, you hate the Chinese mainland. Oh, God, they're awful. Chinese okay, fine. But it's like, okay, so hypothetically speaking, Taiwan goes to war with the Chinese mainland. All kinds of American weapons start piling into Taiwan. All kinds of Taiwan people start dying and getting killed. And while that's going on, your treasured possession, these very important computer chip factories, get blown up by America. They're not your friend, right? And that, it's like the USA claims it cares about Ukrainians. It's the same thing. Right. Again, all right. Okay. All right. You want to buy into the whole narrative about Russia is to blame for all of this. They're not. Right. And I've gone over the history, the Alley of Angels, all of that. But let's say all of that's true. Are you really helping Ukraine by getting them into a fight with someone 10 times their size? Are you really helping Ukraine by getting them into a situation where they have to drag every last old man off the street? Are you really helping Ukraine by giving them bullets full of, depleted uranium so they're not going to be able to grow crops? Once this war is over, Ukraine, it's going to be like 100 years before they ever grow the same amount of crops they grow because they're shooting bullets with poison dust on them with depleted uranium. Ukraine is royally fucked by this war, right? And you can say, well, Ukraine is right. Oh, okay, fine. All right. They're not. Ukraine is not right. But if you want to pretend Ukraine is right, let's talk about this, right? Okay, you want to feel like Ukraine is right. But if Ukraine is right, are they benefiting in any way from being right in this situation? No. Right? And Taiwan, you can argue Taiwan is right against China. But are they going to benefit from getting into a fight with the government on the mainland of China? No. And that's one aspect of this that people, it's very, people don't think about it that way. They're trained to just think in this, oh, hate Russia, hate China narrative. But people that you just can't make any headway, they will understand oh, yeah, Ukraine is royally screwed. Even if this war ended tomorrow, and Ukraine won, hypothetically speaking, which will never happen. But if somehow magically the war was over tomorrow and Ukraine got everything back, Crimea, all of it, they'd still be royally fucked. You do realize that, right? Even if every inch of territory Ukraine got was returned, was claimed by them, and they declared absolute victory, Ukraine is still fucked, right? Like, they've lost a whole generation of young men. They're never going to grow anywhere near the crops they once grew. Their country is demolished and destroyed. It's like, so how did Ukraine benefit here? How is keeping this war going forever and ever and ever benefiting Ukraine? It's not. And it's like, people that won't listen to you on other things might hear that. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. Okay, so now we've got the Rumble rants, right? And, hey, if anyone else wants to buy me a coffee, buy me a coffee questions are always appreciated, right? But we've got the Rumble rants. I answered the super chat or the Cash App one, but the buy me a coffee is the best way to send your questions. I'll answer those if they come in. But now I will answer the Rumble rants, and there's a lot of them. There is a lot of them. All right. Leo Messi says, Tulsi excited me, but now she's a Zionist. Well, she was always a Zionist. I mean, Tulsi always supported Israel, and she actually was quite anti-Islamic at one point. She kind of softened that. I mean, Tulsi's always been a Zionist. Anna Paula Luna hates China. Okay, she's a Republican. I mean, I think it's really neat that she's meeting with Russia. She's pushing the peace process. But yeah, a lot of MAGA hate China. That's, again, what are you surprised? Why is there no true peace politician? Because to really be pro-peace, you have to be an anti-imperialist, and none of the politicians that we have represent genuine anti-imperialism, right? We need to build an anti-imperialist movement, a real movement, not an internet fandom, not a podcast, a real movement that can spread anti-imperialist sentiments, and then maybe we can have political figures. We can have an American George Galloway or something like that. But we're not going to have that unless we go build the movement. And that's why CPI exists. So join the Center for Political Innovation. Help us spread this kind of politics and cultivate a real movement that can get us a real politician. The reason George Galloway was elected to Parliament in Britain was because there was a real movement of people who understood that kind of politics enough to vote for him. We need to build a real anti-imperialist movement. That's why. So join CPI and help us spread and promote anti-imperialism. I didn't realize this article is actually from 2018 about the anti-meme law in Mexico. Well, a lot of countries are passing laws like that about, deep fakes and all kinds of stuff. A lot of countries are restricting different things. The internet is, censorship and all of that. If the Nobel Peace Prize committee was just, Xi Jinping would get one for the Belt and Road and BRICS promoting global peace and development. Yes, you are correct, sir. I agree with you. The Nobel Peace Prize is clearly not just. I mean, it's getting ridiculous. The fact that they would give an anti-Venezuelan activist the prize right now is so beyond ridiculous and insulting of anyone who knows anything about peace and why wars happen. It is absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right. Brain chips in China. My coworker got to hear the Peace MAGA and inauguration convention videos on our way home. Well, that's great. Okay. So you want me to put on this video about Chinese hospitals accelerate brain-computer interfaces? You know what, Penny? We'll put it on. And I'm glad that your coworker got to listen to, Peace MAGA and all of that. We're building a real movement, and, we just got to raise the consciousness of the people. We're engaging in education. So I'm going to put on this video that you sent me about computer chips in China. All right. If anyone wants to send any more questions, right, buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. But yeah, we'll put on Penny's video here. We're well over the 3-hour mark, but that's fine. That's fine. I'm going to be out of the country very soon. If people want to buy me a coffee, that would be great because, I, been hit with expenses. I had to go get the books from the printer and all of that. And so, I'm about to be traveling and I'm going to be having expenses and stuff. And so, it's like, it's not easy to run an organization. It's very expensive to run an anti-imperialist organization. We have donors and we appreciate them. They do great work, but anything that people can send via Cash App or buy me a coffee would be helpful because it's like every month I'm squeezing to, yeah, that's okay. It's okay though. All right. And the book sales have increased, which is good. Book sales have very significantly increased, but at the same time, I don't get that money for a couple months. It's like, so there you go. But anyway, here we go. Here's the video about the brain chips.
To aid the recovery of patients with neurological disorders, Chinese hospitals are increasingly turning to brain-computer interfaces, or BCIs, that can translate thoughts into digital commands. At the country's first BCI clinical ward in Beijing, a 50-year-old patient paralyzed on his left side has regained significant arm mobility after a flexible electrode was implanted under his skull in June. The device enables a novel therapy that retrains the brain's neural pathways while rehabilitating the arm's muscles.
需要术前通过功能磁共振定位这个
Preoperative functional MRI is used to locate the target area. We place the flexible electrode epidurally over the motor cortex and continuously verify during surgery that we are receiving clear neural signals. Only then can we ensure the success of postoperative signal acquisition, decoding, and limb motor control.
指挥肢体的运动过程中才有成功的可能。
Scientists say dedicated BCI wards like this one are crucial for accelerating the expansion of these kinds of procedures to a wider range of neurological conditions.
因为脑机接口它不是一个单纯临床的工作，它包含着计算科学。
BCI is no ordinary clinical work as it involves computational science, computing, bioscience, and clinical practice. It is a multidisciplinary collaboration. For example, we work with the Chinese Institute for Brain Research and chip companies across different institutions. By establishing this ward, Beijing Tiantan Hospital has created a platform that integrates expertise in technology, computing, electrophysiology, and clinical imaging, connecting the entire chain of BCI clinical trials and accelerating progress in the field.
试验的一个链条就连在一起了，可以更好的推动这个脑机接口这临床试验的进展。
In August, China released a set of guidelines to promote the development of the BCI industry, aiming to achieve key technological breakthroughs by 2027.
Very, very exciting to see how they're innovating and advancing technology. Thank you very much for sharing that great video, Penny. Very, very good. Very, very good. Now, Hempcar says Reuters, he has a news item about how the USA is increasing its anti-drug force in Latin America, which is bad news, but not shocking, not surprising. And that, he seems to be following the Ronald Reagan playbook of, we're gonna use drugs as an excuse to wage regime change wars in Latin America. Right. And it's not shocking that that's what they're doing. That seems to be the policy of the Trump administration. We're protecting people from drugs. No, you're not. You're actually just, working to destabilize and oppose governments, but that seems to be their policy. Also, and then we have another Rumble rant. Leo Messi says Xi Jinping deserves the Nobel Prize. Yeah, for all the work they've done to raise people up out of poverty. Yes, I would agree, right? The real way to bring peace is with economic development. That is the real way that you bring peace. Peace comes when people are trading with each other, when there's economic prosperity. Raising people up. Economic growth is the road to peace. And that's why I'm pro-growth. There is no limit to growth. I am pro-humanity. I am pro-growth. And that is why, that's one thing about CPI. We are pro-humanity. We are pro-growth. pro-growth, and that, if people can be lifted out of impoverished conditions, they're not going to join drug gangs, they're not going to join terrorist groups, and if countries are trading with each other, they're not going to go to war, and that economic prosperity and abundance is the road to a better world, right? And that I always quote, Marx knew this. Marx knew it very, very well. And this is in the critique of the Goethe program. I reference this quote. Marx said, right can never be higher than the conditions of society, condition thereof. Where is the quote? Yeah, here we go. In the higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to the division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor is vanished, after labor becomes not only a means of life, but life's prime want, after the productive forces have increased with the all-around development of the individual and the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to its ability, to each according to his needs. The road to a classless world, a world without coercion in the state, is abundance. When there's enough for everybody, there's no need for anyone to take from anybody else. And the only way you can create equality is with abundance. The problem with capitalism is capitalism does not create abundance because it has this built-in problem of overproduction. The more wealth that you create, the poorer people get. The market becomes glutted with products that cannot be sold, which is deeply unnatural. It has this unnatural problem of overproduction, which is exacerbated by the tendency of the falling rate of profits. I'll put the socialist math video on to explain this. The problem with capitalism is that it prevents growth, and you need a planned economy to really have economic growth. So I will put the socialist math video on. If anyone has any last minute questions, now is the time to ask them. I'm starting to get tired, but this is the last, if you want to last call, please ask questions. Rumble rants are good. Cash App is good, but the best way is buy me a coffee. I'll put on the socialist math video. The problem with capitalism is the irrationality of the market. So, I will put on a video explaining that and how we need a centrally planned economy to overcome the irrationality of the market, the anarchy of production. And then from there, I will answer any more questions, and then I will go to bed. Remember, Monday night, we're having an open phones show. So if you want to come on the show Monday night, we're doing that.
Explain what needs to be explained, what used to be considered Marxism 101, about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. Do you know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America. So I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I'm going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
I very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product, right? If you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledge. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system.
Yeah. The capitalist system creates gluts of overproduction, poverty created by abundance. So you need a centrally planned economy. You need the banks, factories, and industries to be rationally organized to overcome that so you can create the vast abundance necessary to create a world without inequality, a world without classes, a world with so much wealth and abundance, you don't need a state. The problem with capitalism is not that it creates endless growth. It doesn't. It's incapable of creating endless growth. It creates endless gluts of overproduction. As capitalism becomes more technologically advanced, it becomes less and less stable. And we need a rationally planned economy. And that's why all these people that talk about degrowth, socialist degrowth, that's why they drive me up the wall, because it's like, we don't want degrowth. We want unending growth. We want so much growth that we can build a world with no government, with no classes, with no inequality, where everyone has what they need, where people don't even have to work. We want massive growth, right? And that the irrationality of the market is getting in the way of that growth. And if you want to understand economics, right, the books that I learned all of this from, right? The Future is Up to Us by the great Nelson Peary. Amazing book. High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy. And Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein. Those three books will help you understand that. I also, if you want to understand the nature of fascism and, Malthusianism and why they push degrowth, I recommend the book Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt, who was a leader of the British Communist Party during the 1930s. He wrote a very, very good book, which I have around here somewhere, called Fascism and Social Revolution. It's a very, very good book. And then I also recommend Dialectical Economics by Lynn Marcus. Lynn Marcus, this is his Marxist textbook about, degrowth and, fascism being rooted in the destruction of the productive forces. So yeah, if you want to study economics, right? Again, it's about economics for me, right? Again, it's about economics. It was always about economics for me. It was always about economics. It was about understanding that, that what I'd been told about economics, that, communism just doesn't work. You just can't have a planned economy. It's never worked anywhere. That's such a fucking lie, right? And that we've been lied to about economics so much. That's what I got into all of this about. I think we can have a rationally organized economy, right? If you want my basic overview, read Where is America Going? Marxism, MAGA, and the Coming Revolution. I know, Kate read it and she's quoting it, and and that book will basically tell you what it's all about. But we need to overcome the irrationality of the market. We need to have a rationally organized economy. We need to break apart imperialism and have a society that unleashes human creativity and growth, a government of action that fights for working families, a government of action that invests in working people and invests in human creativity. That's what we need. So that's the message that we have on here night after night. I'll be back tomorrow night. I'll be back tomorrow night. And I'm going to try to stream every night before I go. Monday night, we're having an open phones show. So if you want to come on Monday night and ask me anything or talk about anything, Monday night before I leave town, we want to have an open phones broadcast. So keep that in mind. And I'm going to put on the closing music. Catch you all next time. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.